Our story commences with the protagonist lamenting his humdrum existence. Born into an ordinary household, his days were characterized by monotonous routine and pervasive tedium. He firmly believed that his life would conclude without witnessing anything remotely remarkable. However, fate had other plans in store. One of the protagonist's eyes shimmers with an otherworldly glow as he proclaims that everything took a dramatic turn on the monitor before him. A fair-haired character materializes on screen and announces the discovery of a game entitled Heroes of Destiny. This fateful encounter marked his ascension as the sovereign of the world. Now, back in the confines of his apartment, he revels in the solitude he so desperately craves. His attitude towards school is one of indifference rather than affection or aversion. He activates his computer and declares that the simple act of game playing is sufficient to elicit profound contempt. Within this digital realm, he assumes the mantle of the hero. He has always harbored a predilection for solitary gaming experiences due to the myriad of pathways they offer. Innumerable times, it even resorted to exploits, transcending all of the system's limitations. It felt as if that entire virtual realm existed exclusively for him. Nevertheless, with a bashful countenance, he admits that was his previous notion. But now it's time for a fresh start. He initiates the live stream. Immediately, someone inquires if he's genuinely broadcast. Midweek, the entire chat erupts, ridiculing him, questioning if he's some sort of vagrant who skipped school to remain glued to his computer. Suddenly, a user named AJ contributes a donation of 10. Although a meager sum, he's grateful. Something is superior to nothing. Then, a user identified as DEA sends a staggering 1,000. Bewildered, he clutches the monitor. The chat explodes with curiosity, demanding to know the identity of this extravagant benefactor. They're certain this fellow will demand a reimbursement. However, the individual simply requests him to examine his inbox. Upon accessing his messages, a communication from the AIM's architect appears. The sender professes to be a devoted follower of the channel and, coincidentally, a software engineer. Some time ago, he engineered a game of notorious difficulty, so challenging, in fact, that no participant triumphed during its closed beta phase. He seeks a competent individual to undertake this game, to evaluate its intricacy and provide an endorsement, regardless of personal preference. Our protagonist becomes captivated by this assertion, that it remained unconquered. What if he, against all odds, achieved victory? Even an ordinary individual like himself could ascend to extraordinary heights. A dialog box materializes on the PC, inquiring about game installation. Without hesitation, he assents. Thus commences a game entitled Heroes of Destiny. The missive declares that the realm of Roke was annihilated by the Japal Empire in the year 294. He would be brought into existence as an unremarkable soul in this realm and rise to become a legendary champion. His destiny, to thwart the revival of the malevolent Demon King. And upon ascending to the celestial throne, he would be bestowed with any desire, a boundless ocean of possibilities. He remarks, "The visuals are far less impressive than I anticipated. However, given its solo development, this represents the pinnacle of achievement." He then inscribes his alias, destined to be the Game Master. With that final act, a welcoming message materializes upon the screen, addressed to the inhabitant of Ellen. He abruptly finds himself disoriented amidst a sylvan expanse. The game presented itself as both mundane and peculiar, devoid of even a rudimentary tutorial. Yet this didn't perturb him. Suddenly, he detects something in the distance. It was the village elder, who claimed he was an unfamiliar face, and inquired about his purpose there. However, our protagonist found it peculiar because there was no dialogue window. Typically, there should have been a text box for input. He pondered if the non-playable character could genuinely comprehend his speech. He then demanded the elder surrender all his funds, or he would annihilate every villager. He waited with bated breath for the elder's reaction, only to be struck on the head by the old man. The elder questioned the boy's nonsensical outburst. With that blow, his character collapsed and, unsurprisingly, perished. He was bewildered, attempting to discern if verbal communication with the in-game characters was truly possible. The game prompted him to retry, and he declared that he would certainly not succumb to defeat so easily. The elder poses the same inquiry once more. However, this time, he confesses his need for sustenance and refreshment. He implores the old man for assistance. Overcome with compassion, The elder guides him to the settlement, instructing him to follow. He subsequently enters the man's dwelling, where he's offered a tankard. The man urges him to imbibe its contents to compose himself. Expressing gratitude, the protagonist consumes the beverage, only to succumb to poison, perishing in the chair. A sudden notion strikes him. He severs the internet connection to his computer. Deprived of internet access, the game's developer loses the ability to manipulate these characters. Nevertheless, upon engaging the elder in conversation, everything becomes erratic and distorted. In a fleeting moment, a notification materializes, declaring his demise for uttering gibberish. Instantly, he discerns that severing the internet connection is futile. The key to conquering this, he suddenly recalls the creator's name, the architect of this game, DEA, but he's uncertain if it's an individual or the moniker of the development team. It was already 1 a.m., so he decided to save his progress, deeming it sufficient for the day. Yet he was captivated. A game where conversing with NPCs was possible. It felt as if this world of heroes truly breathed. Now, the game's insurmountable reputation made sense. Lost in contemplation, he opens his eyes before succumbing to sleep. He realizes his growing enthrallment. Fueled by a yearning for distinction, from that day forward, he became engrossed in the game. As he delved deeper, time became irrelevant. He was utterly absorbed, and this persisted for a decade. Quite the dedication, huh? 10 years invested in the same pursuit. Within an office, someone inquires about Oshiro-san. It appears the caller is his colleague. She informs him that the requested documents have already been dispatched. A man expresses his gratitude, and a moment elapses. She then extends her congratulations on his successful completion of all tasks. Oshiro-san reciprocates her thanks and offers assistance. She stands there, visibly flustered. At a loss for words, she proposes a small dinner outing, just the two of them, before returning home. Perhaps, she suggests, they could enjoy a second dinner afterward at home. Her expression betrays her hopeful anticipation. Her face clearly reveals her desires. However, Oshiro-san regretfully declines. Citing the need to return home immediately, he leaves the poor girl dumbfounded. He explains that a matter of far greater importance demands his attention. With a farewell wave, he departs, leaving her seemingly crestfallen once more. Rebuffed yet again, she has endured a string of rejections. I'll overlook it this time, for today holds special significance. After a decade, he's finally conquering the game, isn't he? Let's witness the outcome. Night transitions to dawn as he receives accolades for becoming the first mortal to ascend to the divine realm. His name is etched in the hallowed hall of honor. Our protagonist stands there, beaming with pride. He has ultimately triumphed over the challenge. But his elation swiftly morphs into a different emotion. After such a prolonged journey, he has achieved his lifelong aspiration to attain a certain uniqueness. Conversely, however, his reality feels more mundane than ever before. Wouldn't a life shared with his colleague have been far more remarkable? You fool, at least within the virtual world. He experienced a sense of profound transformation. He reminisces about iconic figures like the Black Prince, Gale Krakow, Cardinal Caesar Labaro, and the sorceress Celestina Urin. Each character exuded charisma and possessed distinct individualities. Their responses felt incredibly authentic, leading him to believe these individuals existed in another realm. But now, rubbing his weary eyes, he scans his surroundings until a noise catches his attention. Gazing at the monitor, a message appears, inquiring if he wishes to embark on a fresh escapade. This candid message cautions him that selecting yes will result in teleportation to the land of El. Furthermore, upon confirmation, return would be impossible until the quest completion. He wouldn't be able to come back until he finished the game. Hashira contemplates the possibility of a hidden level. Nevertheless, gripping his mouse, which resembles a brick more than a pointing device, he expresses his enthusiasm to relive the entire journey. Having reached this juncture, pressing onward is his sole option. As expected, he finds himself whisked away to the continent of Ellen. Contrary to other lead characters, he received an unequivocal caution. An unfamiliar voice greets the game's overlord. Gradually, his eyelids part. He ponders the agonizing ache in his chest. Respiration is labored. His surroundings remain a complete enigma until a nearby voice declares. He's roused at last. It's an elderly gentleman adorned with a mustache, who proclaims, "It's due to the premium elixir I procured." The youth's eyes begin to flutter open. The man addresses him as Kaix-sama. But bewilderment sets in. Our protagonist inquires about the mustached man's identity. He's rendered speechless. To his recollection, the medic never indicated memory loss as a side effect of the potion. The protagonist wears a forlorn expression. He's undeniably disoriented. The man then proposes a reintroduction. He declares his name to be Russell. The protagonist swiftly discerns that Russell isn't speaking Japanese. Yet, he comprehends every utterance. Most distressingly, the persistent chest pain lingers. It's been present since his awakening. Russell expresses remorse, attributing the discomfort to his own haste. The pectoral pain, he explains, is a consequence of the administered elixir, but assures it will soon subside. He promises imminent relief for the boy and announces his departure. With that, the portal swings shut. Our protagonist remains bewildered. Time elapses, and the flame extinguishes itself. He opens his eyes anew and ascends from the slumber chamber. Approaching the looking glass, his suspicions are confirmed. His physique feels utterly foreign. It's undeniable. He inhabits a new vessel. The body before him felt utterly foreign. 3 decades of memories flickered within his mind. Yet his own name remained elusive, a forgotten whisper. Gazing into the mirror's depths, he grappled with the enigma of his identity. Who was this person? Suddenly, the familiar system window materialized, glowing before him. Player name? Kaix, a nobleman without a vocation, utterly devastated and shattered. Level 8, with a reputation of 3 stars and a mere 14% approval rate. Moreover, he commanded governing skills in finance, development, and military strategy. Kaix observed that the display bore a striking resemblance to the game's user interface. The baffling transportation to this continent now clicked into place. It all made perfect sense. He was in the central setting of the entire game, the renowned continent of Ellen. Placing a hand upon his chest, he declared, he needs to compose himself first. A peculiar sensation then washes over him. He pounds his chest once more and crumples to the ground in agony. This vessel of his was in ruins, and he was utterly clueless as to why. At the very least, it was evident this was no mere figment of his imagination. Firstly, he would have to acclimate to answering to the name Kaix. He approaches the bed and incessantly reiterates to himself that he is in fact this Kaix individual. The instant he contemplates it, the window materializes once more. He's convinced that this phenomenon must be exclusive to his perception. Currently, he is 15 years of age, and he resolves that this is the opportune moment to amass knowledge. After all, should he lower his vigilance in this realm, his demise is certain. He examines the system and discovers his affiliation with the county of Shurkin. If the location's name matches his surname, it signifies a direct correlation, indicating he's the legitimate successor to this realm's reigning dynasty. At least fortune favored him in that aspect. Suddenly, a knock echoes on the door, jolting him from his thoughts, leaving him wondering about the visitor's identity. He's unsure how to proceed, or what would constitute a typical response for Kaix. He mentally reiterates his identity as Kaix, remaining silent. The scene reveals a young woman standing outside, carrying a large, steaming mug of tea. She announces it's the young master's remedy. Recognizing her as a servant, he opts to project an air of authority. He bids her to enter. The girl steps inside, requesting permission to do so. Kaix scrutinizes her as she approaches, genuflects, and presents the beverage. What manner of concoction is this? She just entered, and I don't detect any medication. Wait, now I spot it. She's remarking on its pleasant warmth and suggesting you should try it. Our protagonist, desperately in need of physical condition, as he appears quite undernourished, inquires about her identity, but then he recognizes that such a question would betray his disorientation. He's clearly not in a lucid state. The young woman, appearing perplexed, asks if he's feeling ill. Suddenly, a system interface materializes within his mind. He responds negatively, stating the system identifies her as Layla. She's 23 years of age, possesses a reputation score of -3 and a dismal approval rate. Nevertheless, he detects an anomaly within the system's data. She's associated with the Viscount of the Hashran domain, given their current location within the county of Shikin. Why is such information displayed in the system? Furthermore, there's an even more peculiar detail. Her combat prowess is exceptionally high, far too formidable for a mere domestic servant. As a seasoned player of the game, he recognizes these are unequivocally not the attributes of an average maid. She stands there, gazing intently at him, patently anticipating his consumption of the beverage. But observing the tea, he's already resolved that he absolutely will not imbibe this concoction, prepared by someone in the employ of a rival household. Layla inquires about his well-being and urges him to partake of the tea. However, Kaix simply instructs her to leave it and depart. A radiant smile blossoms on her face as she implores him to drink it immediately. Kaix seizes her hand with ire, suspecting she's on the verge of coercing him somehow. But the moment it's within his grasp, he feigns a cough and deliberately spills it aside. As the cup plummets, he deems it sufficient. Once every drop of liquid is dispersed, sparing him the need to imbibe it. Suddenly, Layla, with the agility of Spider-Man, snatches the cup midair, preventing a single drop from spilling. Witnessing her execute this classic Peter Parker maneuver, he's utterly bewildered. He gingerly retrieves the cup, pondering the extent of her extraordinary reflexes. Eye contact must be avoided at all costs, lest she deduce his deliberate action. As she rises, he averts his gaze, lowering his head. She deposits the tea upon the desk, assuring him of his medication's safety. Meanwhile, he remains supine in bed, refraining from meeting her eyes. He's certain of the poison within, and refuses to consume it under any circumstances. He shuts his eyes, contemplating a solution to this predicament. Just as consciousness begins to fade, embracing him tightly, she inquires about his well-being. Kaix contemplates whether he successfully evaded the precarious predicament. For the time being, he consults the system interface. He seeks further knowledge regarding Layla's familial lineage. Initially, his status reveals that he is the offspring of the Count's deceased first spouse. His mother has already passed into the afterlife. He ponders the possibility of half-siblings, born from the Count's second union. He unearths the existence of an older sibling, age 16. Then the system discloses that the new wife's surname also concludes with Asura. He instantaneously deduces the connection and discerns that this woman orchestrated Layla's mission. Should Kaix, the first wife's son, perish, the woman's offspring would ascend to the countship. Uncharacteristically, the seemingly deranged individual experiences a cold sweat, while simultaneously feeling a surge of exhilaration. The game, Heroes of Destiny, commences with formidable challenges. He reassures Layla of his improved condition and expresses his gratitude, but inquires about the stepmother's well-being. Leo's countenance registers astonishment as he reveals that the Countess is deeply distraught by the young man's actions. Referring to his suicide attempt, she implores him never to contemplate such a drastic measure again. Kaix finally comprehends the reason for the boy's confinement to bed and his deteriorated condition, evidenced by the evident thoracic pain. This lad, he deduces, must have attempted to take his own life. He vows to refrain from such behavior in the future, and Layla responds that the Countess will undoubtedly be relieved to receive this news. He reiterates his thanks and requests her departure. However, her expression shifts, taking on a serious tone as she states that he has neglected to take his prescribed medication. Fear grips him. It appears the persistent girl will not depart until he consumes the medicine. The predicament lies in her true purpose, to eliminate him. Should he decline, she might resort to immediate assassination, despite his familiarity with the game. At this juncture, he's merely a vulnerable adolescent. He could attempt to cry out for assistance. But what if she silences him before anyone arrives? He'd undoubtedly perish before rescue could come. She's already pivoting back towards him, and he discerns that he might be left with no alternative but to imbibe the liquid. Then a fundamental question arises in his mind. Why resort to poison? Why not simply stab him and flee? If that's her objective, it's evident she cannot attract notice. The toxin is a method of staging a suicide. It's the identical substance the farmer offered him a decade prior. Layla proposes assistance if he struggles to consume it. But Kaix has gleaned a crucial lesson. In this game, the most unfavorable outcome is always inevitable. Therefore, preparedness is key. He's convinced that defiance is futile. She'd pry open his jaws and force-feed him the concoction. A blush creeps across the madman's face. The mere utterance fills him with exhilaration. Truly the game, Heroes of Destiny, never fails to deliver. Layla settles into her seat and proffers the tea once again. In a sudden move, he seizes the toxic brew and gulps it down. Layla simply observes as the venom's potency takes hold. As anticipated, this was inevitable. The pressing question, how will he escape this predicament? There must be an individual or an item capable of resolving this dilemma. Then, Russell's words resurface. He recalled Russell boasting about possessing a stockpile of potent elixirs. A scheme materializes in his mind. He instructs Layla to venture outside and summon Russell. She inquires why, and he subjects her to humiliation. He inquires if he truly needs to justify himself to a mere underling. The young woman, startled, promptly apologizes as Kaix interjects and commands her to depart and summon Russell. She hastily exits. Kaix recollects that the elixir Russell administered earlier could be bartered for a fortress. Yet, the man utilized it on him without a second thought. At the bare minimum, he doesn't appear to harbor murderous intentions. The moment Leia vacates the chamber, Kaix lurches forward, attempting to regurgitate. Despite his strenuous efforts, nothing transpires. The game wouldn't provide such simple solutions. One fact remained evident. Every predicament possessed a resolution. He commences rummaging through the cabinets, frantically seeking an answer. However, the system laments that his eyelids feel heavy. As darkness creeps in at the edges of his awareness, he persists in his search, flinging books aside and ransacking the shelves for an answer. His vision blurs, his eyelids growing leaden. He crumples to the ground. Will he be forced to restart from the very beginning? Or is this his true demise? Just then, something catches his eye. Dead center on the shelves. A vial. His face transforms at the sight. He drags himself forward, fingers closing around the glass. He uncorks it, inhales, and recoils. It's not what he anticipated. A putrid stench, like sour milk, assaults his nostrils. And that's precisely what it is. Rancid goat's milk. He recalls that in the game, yogurt was the remedy for the toxin. But can curdled milk truly qualify as yogurt? The system, a cautionary voice, reiterates the fading of his sight. He's aware that following the third notification, he'll have but a single minute remaining. He raises the beverage to his lips, pledging retribution against Layla. He consumes the liquid before succumbing to unconsciousness once more. After a period, he awakens to Russell inquiring about his well-being. As Kaix's eyes flutter open, he's uncertain if he's experiencing déjà vu or a game reset. However, Russell is perplexed by his words. He indicates a more urgent matter. He questions the disarray of the room. And why? The youth was slumbering on the floor upon his arrival. Kaix discerns that the game did not restart. He persevered. Yet, that brush with death is an ordeal he vehemently refuses to repeat. Regardless of future events, he's resolute in his will to survive. Now that this matter is resolved, he needs to ascertain this man's standing. He scrutinizes Russell, and the system interface materializes. Currently, Russell serves as the acting count of this territory. This is due to the demise of the previous count, who had not yet designated an heir. Although a provisional appointment, it holds potential advantages. The man exudes a rigid, military demeanor. Therefore, Kaix deems him trustworthy. After all, Russell administered the life-saving elixir. Kaix addresses Russell, indicating he possesses information to divulge. Following a brief exchange, Kaix reveals the unfolding events. Russell counters that substantiation is lacking. Kaix discovers that the potion Russell utilized was standard operating procedure within the family. It was merely adherence to established protocol. Russell clarifies this point. Every member of the Chikan lineage holds equal stand. Thus, he's obligated to support both factions. Kaix then inquires if Russell desires him to continue ingesting the medication until his demise, enabling everyone to lay claim to the inheritance. However, Russell questions whether Kaix genuinely suffers from amnesia. He ought to be aware that the Chikan family is grappling with severe financial distress. Indeed, the Delilah family's assistance is a godsend. He probes whether the young man truly lacks recollection or is merely feigning ignorance. Kaix deduces that Russell requires irrefutable evidence before taking action. At the very least, he surmises that the woman responsible for his poisoning presumes him deceased. He advises Russell to abandon the matter, asserting that everything is satisfactory regardless. Nevertheless, he has a modest proposition. Russell perceives a shift in the boy's disposition. 4 hours later, within the confines of Chikan Castle, a shadowy figure darts across the rooftops. The silhouette halts atop the building, adjusting their facial concealment. The individual surveys the knights below. It seems to be Layla who observes the substantially fortified security. Her gaze sweeps the wall, detecting a hidden passage. In a flash, she's within the castle walls. She nears an imposing door, No guards stand watch outside the chamber. She pushes it open. A sheet-covered form lies within. Doubt lingers. Is Kaix truly deceased? At least a specialized toxin was employed, ensuring a painless demise. She withdraws a letter from her pocket. It's placed upon the desk. His seal is retrieved from a drawer. The letter is stamped, completing the charade. Only a safe departure remains. Abruptly, a figure emerges from behind her and presses a blade against her throat. She instantaneously identifies the timbre of the voice, yet the individual remains silent. Terror grips her, anticipating the chilling sensation of steel slicing her flesh. She implores him to pause, her cries echoing, proclaiming that it's futile. Lord Kaix has already perished, and now the Chikan lineage is destined to be absorbed by the Grumbine clan. Indeed, it is Russell looming over her. Witnessing the unfolding events, she lapses into a momentary hush. Then, she inquires why he doesn't simply embrace the role of a modest nobleman, pledging allegiance to the Chikan household. At this juncture, the youth rises and declares that everything has transpired precisely as he foresaw. The naive maiden is visibly shaken. Isn't that right? Our protagonist remarks, adding that the gradual demise induced by the insidious toxin is quite invigorating. However, he finds it intriguing how one aristocratic family endeavors to eliminate another through such treacherous means. He's convinced that if this were to become public, it would erupt into an utter catastrophe. Abruptly, Layla ducks and wrenches her arm free from Russell's grasp. But the moment she attempts to escape, he seizes her arm once more. With a rapid spin and a blow to her ribs, she falters, exposing her thighs. Kaix recognizes that the disparity in their skill levels is a stark 3 stages. She's hopelessly outmatched, yet Layla persists, arguing that he possesses no concrete proof. Therefore, no one will believe his accusations. However, Kaix serenely counters that the mere act of plotting to murder a nobleman is a capital offense, even if the perpetrator is of noble blood themselves. And his evidence, he adds, is plainly visible right there on the desk. As for witnesses, he gestures towards her, declaring that one such individual stands directly before him. Abruptly, her countenance shifts, and the unfortunate maiden begins to swoon. She crumples to the ground, leaving him bewildered by the sudden turn of events. Russell clarifies that she has lost consciousness. He rests his hand upon her form and detects a peculiar sphere of magical energy. Our protagonist identifies it as a mana void. Russell elucidates that she likely lacks the knowledge to harness mana. Respiratory exercises place her at the level of an elite combatant. With proper instruction, however, Russell notes something amiss. He perceives something peculiar. Kaix appears unfazed by this revelation, implying prior knowledge of this fact. He recollects the youth's mention of a modest petition. And now, Russell inquires about the extent of the child's knowledge. Kaix declares that, for the time being, they must detain her. Their rationale: they have numerous future requests to make. The mischievous maid is bound to a chair. Her arm bears a peculiar resemblance to a pokeball embedded within. He flings a concoction towards her. Our young lady even meticulously cleanses her face. Upon regaining consciousness, she discovers herself restrained to the chair. Felix promptly alludes to the slow death toxin. Its lethality, manifesting within 3 to 6 hours, is evident. It's the quintessential elixir for individuals contemplating self-termination. He postulates that such a demise would be perceived as suicide. Everyone would presume it a voluntary act. Gripping her face, he demands an explanation for her actions. She feigns obliviousness. She pretends to misunderstand his inquiry. However, Kaix asserts his certainty of her fear of death. He attributes her behavior to this fear. This signifies her insufficient allegiance, would sacrifice herself for Lady Stella. But the young woman remains taciturn. He instructs Russell to coerce a confession. Russell forces her jaw open and notices an object in Kaix's grasp. He wonders about its nature, but Kaix abruptly flings it into her mouth. Instantly, she detects a peculiar odor. It's likely that same rancid goat milk once more. He commands Russell to compel her to swallow it. She thrashes in the restraints, desperately attempting to escape. But her efforts are futile as Russell releases his grip. She shrieks, demanding to know what they forced upon her. Kaix nonchalantly replies that it was merely a touch of venom. Then, he inquires if she's acquainted with a substance called sudis. Terror consumes the captive. She insists it's preposterous. She proclaims that a nobleman of his lineage could never acquire such a potent agent. However, Kaix counters that with sufficient funds, one can accomplish anything, and to demonstrate this, he reveals that the key component of the dish is daikon radish. Russell appears astonished. Meanwhile, Kaix patiently anticipates her response. Layla vehemently denies believing him, but the protagonist is convinced that she's absolutely terrified. She then declares she will depart momentarily to inform her superior and report that the assassination was successful. She inquires if he genuinely believes she will comply with his directives. However, Kaix merely poses the question, is she prepared to perish? Acidus's marionette. Venom possesses over 3,000 distinct remedies, contingent upon the specific concoction, and the appropriate counteragent for what she ingested is etched within his memory. Therefore, if she desires to avoid a senseless demise, she would be wise to heed his words. A young woman gasps for air, visibly distressed, yet he presses for her response. After a brief moment of indecision, she exclaims that it's acceptable and demands to be unbound. However, Kaix notes that she appears remarkably irate at her would-be savior. She trembles, on the verge of tears, confined to the chair, imploring him for freedom. Russell finds it peculiar that she abruptly acquiesced. Now, she grovels for clemency. Kaix understands it's merely the tainted goat milk, wreaking internal chaos. She beseeches Russell to release her, but Russell wavers, inquiring if Kaix has overlooked her prior attempt on his life. The boy counters that she's an invaluable eyewitness, and they must afford her a modicum of respect. Russell is utterly clueless. All the while, she implores them to release her. She's on the precipice of tears, teetering on the brink of a breakdown. Her pleas for liberation echo as moments tick by. Finally, she declares her departure to deliver the news of the assassination's triumph. She exits the chamber. Kaix understands I'll have to contend with another individual, someone capable of commanding all the knights. That very person stands directly beside him. Russell abruptly inquires how Kaix acquired such comprehensive knowledge. The simpleton almost blurts out that he gleaned everything from books, but he discerns that Russell would find that preposterous. Russell cautions him that attributing such insights to mere books would be tantamount to a death warrant. Now, Kaix is at a loss for words. Nobody will buy his story if he professes to be from another dimension. He then inquires whether Russell recalls the blade he plunged into his own chest. Russell affirms his recollection, but he questions the relevance of the inquiry. Our protagonist elucidates that the dagger is in fact a family heirloom, bequeathed to him by his mother. She purportedly wielded arcane powers, and it appears these abilities have now manifested within him. Russell remains skeptical. However, Kaix declares that he never envisioned acquiring such enlightenment would involve piercing his own heart. The steward contends that such a unique artifact would be universally recognized. Kaix pauses in contemplation and inquires if he's familiar with Claire's dagger. It seems Russell is acquainted with it. He inquires if the previous woman's blade was truly that legendary relic. Was it, in fact, that fabled treasure? If so, it could elucidate Kaix's extensive knowledge. However, Russell points out a single predicament. He demands to know if anyone else is privy to this information. Kaix guarantees him that nobody else knows. He's the first. Nina probes Russell about his opinion on Layla's account, particularly the notion that all of Count Claire's actions, his father's maneuvers, had been divulged. A valiant knight like his father, poised for promotion, shouldn't have perished in a simple monster assault. It's preposterous to accept such a narrative. Russell instantly discerns that Kaix is soliciting his aid, but in the treacherous power struggles of inheritance, Russell has no desire for involvement. However, if the Count's demise was indeed a calculated assassination, a revelation that alters everything, yet clutching his blade tightly, Russell grapples with his thoughts. As a seasoned warrior, he's averse to becoming embroiled in political machinations. This conviction has been his guiding principle for half a century. Just as he's poised to convey this to Kaix, the young boy abruptly exclaims, vehemently demanding answers for his father's demise. His sole desire is comprehension, to understand the circumstances surrounding his father's assassination. He yearns to identify the perpetrators clearly to initiate his quest for retribution. He challenges Russell, questioning his lack of inquisitiveness. He asserts that the culprit's identity is already known to them, someone who undoubtedly profited from his father's death. However, they cannot succumb to despair, simply due to the perceived complexity of the situation. He hesitates briefly, then inquires about the morality of a knight serving a family implicated in a fabricate. Faced with the proposition of assassination, Russell momentarily hesitates. Then he genuflects, pledging his allegiance to Kaix. Asura observes, our young protagonist is elated, witnessing Russell's declaration with one caveat. Through this action, he renounces the principles he upheld for 5 decades, namely his vow to abstain from political entanglements. However, Kaix relishes the acquisition of such a potent individual as a comrade, particularly one so deeply invested in the retribution he craves. He bids Russell to rise, stating that oaths of fealty are unnecessary for someone lacking a formal title. But Russell offers reassurance, vowing to ensure the boy's ascent to power. Hargai abruptly pivots the conversation, anxious to prevent it from culminating in Russell proposing to mentor him. He declares that, now that the Countess's poisoning scheme has been exposed, everything is aligning perfectly, but merely at the commencement of their retribution. Russell inquires how he might lend his aid. Kaix is on the verge of responding when the vista abruptly shifts. An assembly of individuals congregates around a colossal table. A fair-haired woman, wielding a fan, remarks that the entirety of the group is finally assembled. Murmurs ripple through the crowd, questioning the Countess's occupancy of the throne. The Countess interjects, stating that some among them must already be cognizant of the events that transpired yesterday concerning Prince Kaix. He endeavored to terminate his own existence, utilizing a toxic substance known as slow death. One of the elder statesmen declares that it's a customary selection for those seeking self-annihilation, and if he ingested it, his demise was unavoidable. It's common knowledge that with Kaix's passing, the alliance he symbolized has become inconsequential. The Countess is elated by Kaix's ostensible expiration. It's now undeniable, and Crumbine will inherit the Count's position. This very quandary hangs heavy in the minds of all present. Several propose that the Countess assume interim leadership. Concurrently, in the adjacent chamber, a young man prepares himself. He remarks on the escalating intrigue of the situation. He summons Russell, who vows unwavering loyalty, pledging to follow him to the bitter end. Our protagonist stands fully clad in armor, poised for combat. Crumbine appears to be nothing more than a portly child, likely the offspring of that conniving woman. A veneer of smiles covers the room until a forceful kick splinters the door. The entrant's identity is revealed by the collective gasps of astonishment. As expected, it's Kaix, with Russell close behind. The Countess is utterly bewildered, baffled by his survival. Whispers ripple through the room, all echoing the same inquiry. Kaix strides towards the Countess, addressing her by name. He declares that the throne she occupies is not rightfully hers. She attempts to maintain composure, remarking on his apparent vigor and inquiring about his well-being. A smile graces his lips. He reveals he ingested the poison, but miraculously survived. Then, he cautions her against the rashness of her schemes. She urges him to compose himself and refrain from unfounded allegations, despite never acknowledging her as his mother. Accusing her of assassination is an unpardonable offense. She erupts, proclaiming that within the Grand Hall, one must bear the consequences of their utterances. But Kaix retorts, marveling at her persistent dishonesty, even after her deception has been unveiled. The Duchess, oblivious to his intentions, inquires as to the meaning of his words. Kaix simply states that, for the time being, this is the subsequent course of action. Abruptly, he brings his hands together in a sharp clap, and someone enters the chamber. Layla steps inside. Kaix proclaims that this eyewitness has a statement to deliver. The other occupants of the room are completely oblivious to this woman's identity. However, the Duchess instantly discerns that, if this is indeed who she suspects, she's in grave peril. Layla genuflects, and Kaix prompts her to divulge her name. The young woman gradually opens her eyes, briefly gazes at Crumbine, and identifies herself as Layla. Now, the Duchess is engulfed in panic, baffled as to why this girl is present. Layla declares herself to be a clandestine operative, affiliated with the Hashiran families, Special Operations Division. Kaix instructs her to elaborate. She elucidates that individuals within this unit are bereft of parents and rigorously trained in the Gorda territories. The youngsters who endured were meticulously chosen and dispatched to various locales. Using fabricated identities, he inquires if she was operating undercover within his fortress. She affirms, posing as a domestic servant employed by Lady Stella Kaix. He then probes whether she comprehended her true objective. Layla concedes that she did. The Duchess erupts, declaring the entire situation a ludicrous fabrication. Other attendees object vehemently, asserting Layla's 5-year tenure at the castle. How could she possibly be an infiltrator? The room devolves into a cacophony of allegations that a Hashiran family member is orchestrating a clandestine plot. Nevertheless, others ponder why Layla would divulge such incriminating information. For that very reason, the treasurer beside the Duchess succumbs to anxiety. He bellows at Russell, exasperated by his continued silence. Could he genuinely believe the testimony of a mere servant girl? Russell retorted calmly that she wasn't a servant, but a perpetrator apprehended in the act. Under pressure, she confessed to being an operative, employed by the Hashiran clan. Regardless of whether this is a machination or not, judgment must be reserved until after her deposition. The treasurer was left speechless. Another nobleman interjected, demanding the treasurer cease his meddling and permit the woman to speak. The incensed treasurer questioned his audacity. However, another voice bellowed for silence. The room descended into quietude. The Duchess's fury was palpable. Someone inquired about Layla's objective. During her tenure with the Hashiran family, she declared her assignment was intelligence gathering. Kaix pressed for specifics regarding the information. She elucidated that she was entrusted with monitoring all financial inflows and outgoings of the domain, meticulously documenting every itinerary and destination of the erstwhile count, while simultaneously tracking the whereabouts of political confederates and loyal subjects of Kaix. He then advances and inquires about her latest undertaking. She discloses that her directive was to administer a lethal dose of slow death poison to Prince Kaix. Following his demise, she was to deposit a counterfeit suicide missive in his chambers to fabricate the illusion of self-inflicted death. Kaix, exhibiting his characteristic composure and pragmatism, interrogates her about the conclusion of her assignment. She confesses to successfully administering the toxin, but being apprehended by Count Russell. As she attempted to place the fabricated note, the Duchess erupts in a shriek, vociferously demanding the woman's immediate detention. Sentinels hasten to apprehend Layla, who endeavors to fight back, vehemently proclaiming the lack of substantiating proof. Kaix, maintaining his characteristic composure, beckons Russell. Russell complies, producing Forge's suicide missive. He elucidates that he was present in Kaix's quarters when Layla infiltrated to surreptitiously place the note. Subsequently, he unveils a recollection pertaining to the Earth Scroll. He reminds the assembly that this enchantment possesses the ability to expose malevolent intent. Utilizing this scroll, they can ascertain the individual who directed Layla to execute this deed. The treasurer comprehends that, should this evidence be divulged, their downfall is imminent. They must thwart its revelation, even if it necessitates silencing all those present. Kaix, perceiving the treasurer's anxiety, offers a knowing smirk. Anticipating a desperate maneuver, he extends his limbs and summons the knights. The chamber echoes with a rhythmic thud of boots as a phalanx of knights advances into the hall. They array themselves strategically, each standing guard behind a nobleman. The truth could no longer be concealed. A wave of terror washed over the treasurer. He frantically demanded an explanation from Russell. Russell elucidated that, upon scrutinizing the scroll's contents, the findings were utterly astounding. To avert pandemonium and mayhem, mobilizing the knights was the sole recourse. The nobles vehemently objected, asserting that introducing soldiers into the hallowed Grand Hall was a sacrilege. Concurrently, Grumbine, the portly heir apparent, sat in dumbstruck silence. Appearing utterly foolish, the Duchess grasped at Ming's attendance, signified irrefutable proof. She knew she was ensnared, with no avenue for escape. Kaix then inquired of Russell what penalty befitted a noble who dared to attempt the assassination of a kinsman. Russell declared the sentence, death by hanging. Overwhelmed by desperation, the Duchess seizes her gluttonous son and proclaims that he had no involvement in this matter. She turns to Kaix, imploring him, and stating that while they lack a blood connection, she remains his mother, beseeching him to trust her words. However, Kaix merely offers Layla a cunning smirk. He inquires if her statement holds any truth. Layla, visibly trembling, divulges that when she obtained her directives from the Countess, Prince Grumbine was in attendance. Kaix beams, and the Duchess succumbs to despair, shrieking and wailing, insisting it's a fabrication. Is it truly a falsehood? Our unperturbed young man declares his indifference towards the veracity of the statement. He's resolute in his intent to dismantle them both. After all, she was the one who initially attempted to assassinate him. In the first instance, he condemns them as the true cravens, fixing his gaze upon her. Wailing on the floor, he proclaims that the fox hunt has now reached its apex. As the Duchess sits frozen, her jaw seemingly cemented to the tabletop in utter astonishment. Suddenly, someone slams their hand down upon the table and bellows for Kaix. Kaix glances over. It's the sovereign of McDonald's himself, Grumbine. The Duchess shrieks for her son. Kaix pivots just in time to notice the boy at his side. But instead of mounting a defense, Grumbine executes a profound bow before Kaix. The entire chamber is dumbstruck as Grumbine gazes at the floor, as if scrutinizing it for insects. The other nobles implore him to rise, insisting on an explanation for this spectacle. But Grumbine addresses Kaix directly, vowing to accept any penalty, provided his mother remains unscathed. The Duchess, bewildered and frantic, starts vehemently demanding Grumbine return to his designated seat. The aristocracy whispers amongst themselves that the situation has escalated beyond reason. However, it's evident Grumbine has irrevocably overstepped a boundary to safeguard his mother. Helix instantly discerns that if he sanctions the execution of both Grumbine and Mao, he will be perceived as the antagonist. He contemplates whether this was Grumbine's intention from the outset. Despite his fury, he rests a hand on Grumbine's shoulder and declares that it's acceptable if he genuinely cherishes his mother so deeply. Helix is left without recourse. Grumbine gazes upward, visibly astonished and filled with a glimmer of hope, inquiring about Helix's meaning. Kaix proposes that if Grumbine confesses his complicity, he will petition for a mitigated sentence for his mother. But he cautions Grumbine to meticulously ponder the ramifications of such a confession. Grumbine wavers, uncertain of how to respond. Simultaneously, the Duchess implores him to refrain from any rash actions. She commands Kaix to cease threatening her firstborn son. Other nobles intervene, condemning her for initially scheming to assassinate Kaix. Meanwhile, Orambine appears bewildered, baffled by how events escalated so drastically out of hand. Kaix, weary of the pandemonium, summons Russell and directs him to apprehend them. Both knights stationed in the corner advance, encircling the Duchess. She implores them to halt, inquiring if they are aware of her identity. But from the periphery, Grumbine can only helplessly observe as his mother is silenced. He clenches his fists. Kaix pivots towards him and probes whether he will assume culpability for the transgression of attempting to poison him. Despite his trepidation, Grumbine, displaying an anticipative valor, confesses Kaix had foreseen this. After all, it was Grumbine's sole remaining recourse. Awed by the lad's deductions, Kaix proclaims that due to Grumbine's preemptive confession, prior to the full disclosure of evidence, the family's reputation shall remain untainted. Nevertheless, as a component of his penalty, Grumbine is mandated to permanently suppress his mana to ensure he poses no further threat. This verdict was unforeseen by Grumbine. Within this kingdom, the populace is stratified into hierarchical tiers: nobles, knights, commoners, and slaves. Knights, commoners, and slaves represent the lower echelons. The sole pathway to knighthood necessitates harnessing mana to augment one's physical prowess. Consequently, mana suppression equates to societal obliteration. For a nobleman, this is catastrophic. Grumbine frantically appeals to his mother, who remains prostrate on the ground, bewildered by the impending consequences. Should he defy the mandate and retain his mana, his mother's complicity will be divulged, resulting in her execution by hanging, an outcome he cannot countenance. The Duchess, silenced by a gag, incapable of verbal protest, vehemently shakes her head in dissent. Fully aware that this penalty is a fate worse than death for a nobleman, Rambane inhales deeply, rises to his feet, and accedes to the conditions. Russell guarantees its fulfillment. He presents Grumbine with a parchment. Grumbine bites into the scroll, He presses his palm against his sternum. A golden annulus materializes above his abdomen. As mana starts to amass, then gradually dissipates, the Duchess collapses to the ground, frantically pleading for him to cease. She understands that not even an archmage could reverse this. Grumbine rips the parchment from his chest. As Kaix observes silently, his mana continues to diminish until it completely evaporates. Everyone present comprehends that his mana has been sealed. The Duchess, weeping uncontrollably, appears despondent, while Grumbine seems satisfied. At the very least, he succeeded in rescuing his mother. Yet, she collapses onto the ground, wailing in despair, lamenting the utter ruin. Disappointment washes over her, crushed by her son's naivete and innocence. Despite the undeniable bond of flesh and blood, her offspring's actions wound her deeply. Grumbine turns towards his mother, his gaze filled with concern. He attempts to console her, to soothe her anguish. He confesses his lifelong aspiration to become an artist, a dream now seemingly shattered. But the Duchess, her mouth still gagged, bites down hard, muffling a scream. She bellows Kaix's name in a fit of rage, her voice thick with unrestrained fury. Wrenching herself free from her bonds, she breaks loose from her captors. She unleashes a torrent of curses upon Kaix, vowing to inflict devastation upon his lineage for generations to come. For eons, the Coleman family, under Kaix's leadership, had thrived. Yet, she acknowledges her current powerlessness, the stark reality of her captivity. Her strength, she realizes, is likely as insignificant as Layla's. Runby sinks to his knees beside his mother, his heart heavy with sorrow. He inquires tenderly about her well-being, his voice soft with concern. However, Kaix is pierced by a sudden stab of remorse. He grapples with the guilt of shattering the aspirations of someone so youthful. But he steels himself, reminding himself that this is merely a game, a contest devoid of genuine consequence. Compassion, he concludes, has no place in this ruthless competition. Russell, observing him, appears perplexed. As Kaix braces himself for the subsequent action, having reached this juncture, there's no retreat for Kaix. He directs Russell to address the outstanding issues. A proclamation is made, Lady Stella and Prince Grumbine will be sequestered in an annex. They are prescribed from all external communication. Mother and son are ushered out through the portal, leaving Kaix gazing intently. He then confronts the treasurer, charging him with divulging confidential records. Consequently, the treasurer is relieved of his duties, detained, and subjected to scrutiny. The former treasurer attempts to rationalize his actions, asserting that his circumstances are unique. He hurls invective at one of the guards, who takes umbrage and delivers a forceful blow to his stomach. With that, the bald individual is hauled away. Alex experiences a tinge of unease for instigating this pandemonium, but the situation appears to be tilting in his favor. The remaining occupants of the chamber quiver with apprehension, dreading they might be the next to face retribution. Scrutinizing Kaix, a revelation dawns upon them. Russell's endorsement signifies that the entire knighthood stands united behind this prince. In essence, the contest for the throne has already concluded. Russell's allegiance to Kaix serves as a stark admonition to everyone present. Kaix summons the chief of security, who approaches hesitantly. Russell intervenes, pronouncing the man suspended from all his responsibilities. The head of security has no recourse but to acquiesce. Meanwhile, the others in the room become increasingly agitated, each fearing their own imminent downfall. Abruptly, a man seated in the corner offers an apology. He confesses to dereliction of duty and requests to be relieved of his position. However, Kaix recognizes this individual as Garrett, is a staunch member of Russell's inner circle. Russell swiftly rejects the resignation, adamantly declaring it unacceptable. Those eager to contribute shall not be permitted, he asserts, while those reluctant will be compelled. Russell delivers this decree with biting sarcasm. The assembly compiles a roster of every official entangled in the debacle. Garrett is entrusted with supervising their dismissal. As these events transpire, Kaix approaches. Garrett appraises him that a mere quartet of individuals within the fiscal division will be spared from scrutiny. It's evident they're about to encounter a plethora of fresh faces, Garrett observes. He counsels clemency for those with trivial transgressions, cautioning that abruptly purging too many officials could jeopardize functionality. Kaix retorts, inquiring whether circumventing inquiries for the sake of operational continuity is truly unwise, he contends. He He posits that extending clemency won't be interpreted as merciful, but rather as a demonstration of frailty. Garrett asserts that numerous officials were simply affiliated with the losing faction. However, Kaix interjects, declaring his verdict is irrevocable. Observing the prince's unwavering stance, Garrett acquiesces. He can't help but ponder how this formerly timid youth has become so steadfast. The assembly acknowledges Russell's prowess and Garud's sagacity. Now, both flank Kaix, reinforcing his authority. Our protagonist grins, recognizing the kingdom is almost within his grasp. Abruptly, a cerulean luminescence erupts. It activates the system, proclaiming it's time to utilize more of his aptitudes. As the system interface materializes, he commences scrutinizing each individual present. The gleam in his eyes and his twisted smirk bestow upon him the countenance of a lunatic. Kaix. He swiftly discerns all individuals affiliated with rival factions, or those whose allegiances remain dubious. These individuals are designated for elimination. Not even the inconsequential will evade his meticulous scrutiny. Only those who endure his trial of loyalty will be incorporated into his future endeavors. Observing the remaining nobility, I sit here, he muses, pondering the origin of this youth's unsettling grin. A tremor runs through some of the onlookers, acutely aware that should Kaix find them displeasing, their fate is sealed. Desperate, they surge forward, lavishing him with adulation, hailing him as an exceptional commander, and imploring him for an audience. Kaix urges them to compose themselves, assuring them that ample opportunity for discourse awaits. From a distance, Russell observes, still perplexed by the unfolding events. Time elapses, and we're transported back to the castle. Following a day consumed by political strategizing, Kaix collapses onto his bed, utterly spent. Drained, he contemplates his former existence, where he was unremarkable in his academics, his appearance, and virtually every other aspect. His life lacked any significant hardship, yet it was devoid of any exceptional triumphs. Everything began to shift upon discovering Heroes of Destiny. He pondered whether accomplishing an unparalleled feat would finally distinguish him. He vividly remembers the instant he conquered the game, and the proclamation declaring him the inaugural human to attain the divine throne. In that pivotal moment, he wiped away his tears and yearned for rebirth on the continent of Ellen. It was the sole method for him to maintain his sense of exceptionalism. Now perched on his bed, he recollects that yearning in the game's storyline. It centered on being born an inconsequential being. The tale recounted that he would need to endure tumultuous periods and evolve into a champion to claim the throne. He abruptly comprehends what has transpired. Upon finishing the game, his desire was fulfilled, but perchance the divine entity misinterpreted his true aspirations. Nevertheless, it's irrelevant now. There's no retreat. Kaix contemplates if conquering this game once again will bestow upon him another wish. As he gradually succumbs to slumber, he resolves to dominate this realm anew. The following morn, he awakens revitalized and prepared for a fresh start. He deliberates on where to commence. Specific locales from the game remain etched in his memory. Yet he's clueless about the true nature of Shikan in this reality. What it's actually like in this world remains a mystery. Kaix determines he must consult the map to pinpoint Shikan's precise location. The system obligingly furnishes him with a comprehensive cartographic representation. Magnificent! A notification materializes, informing him that he has already subjugated the entire Ellen continent, having triumphed over the game once. He now possesses access to every cartographic marker. Euphoria washes over him. He recognizes this as a veritable treasure map, divulging the whereabouts of ancient ruins, subterranean labyrinths, and concealed enigmas. This was a hidden perk, unbeknownst to others, as no one else had achieved victory in the game. The map even harbors information previously unknown to him. Armed with this invaluable tool, traversing the world becomes significantly less arduous. He then pauses, pondering the current year, consulting the imperial calendar. He ascertains it's the year 289. The game Heroes of Destiny commences in 294. This epiphany illuminates Cheat-san's predicament. He acquired a parcel of land that, in a quintet of years, would inexplicably disappear, as Russell alluded to. The bleakest period for their financial standing. Now it all becomes coherent. They teeter on the precipice of financial ruin. Abruptly, a financial summary window materializes before him. Kaix scrutinizes the figures, and instantly exclaims in disbelief. It's utterly astonishing. Assessing the current circumstances, he contemplates if absconding with all the funds is the optimal course of action, to pilfer the coffers and vanish. However, he swiftly discards this notion, recognizing that land holds significantly greater worth than mere riches. It's solely attainable through inheritance. His initial move is to scrutinize all fiscal documentation. He observes that agricultural yields aren't markedly inferior to those of other domains. Military allocations haven't escalated substantially either. Hours elapse as he meticulously examines the records. A few hours subsequently, he slams the papers down, exclaiming that he's utterly drained. Dissecting a decade's worth of territorial financials is overwhelming. For him, nonetheless, he detects a significant predicament. The commercial pathway to the Medrosa Desert has apparently been disrupted. Another nation has established a more profitable trade route, luring merchants away. The enigma is how they finance such an ambitious undertaking. Moreover, the annual liabilities are accumulating more rapidly than their yearly revenue. Quantitative data alone is insufficient to unravel this conundrum. He requires further intel. Exasperated, he massages his temples until a notion ignites. He recollects the elder gentleman from the assembly, the bursar, Gidries, who was apprehended for misappropriating finances. Currently, Gidries is confined within the depths of the dungeon. The scene transitions to Kaix descending into the subterranean prison. A sentinel posted at the entryway inquires about Prince Kaix's presence there. Kaix petitions to have an audience with Gidries. He compresses his nostrils, recoiling from the overpowering fader of the location. As they progress, the sentry comments that he never envisioned the prince gracing such a dismal setting. A locale like this. Kaix recognizes this particular guard from the prior gathering, the type who readily capitulates to those in authority. He beckons the guard, who anxiously replies, his voice trembling before Kaix. Recognizing the guard's lack of influence, Kaix probes whether the falsely accused deserve exoneration. The guard concurs with zeal. He affirms that the prince is unequivocally right. Kaix proceeds, proposing that convicts unworthy of liberation should undergo further scrutiny. The guard offers a salute. He asserts his complete comprehension of Kaix's intent. However, Kaix remains perplexed as to why this man forsook his prior allegiance. To collaborate with him, he resolves to exploit the guard for the time being. He cautions the guard against addressing him as Lord prematurely, as he hasn't formally assumed the title. The guard offers an apology, reverting to calling him Prince, feeling somewhat embarrassed for rigidly enforcing such formality. Kaix simply directs the guard to escort him to Gidries. Moments subsequently, they reach Gidries' confinement. Within, Gidries bemoans the revolting provisions, declaring his imminent release regardless. Abruptly, Kaix materializes, inquiring about Gidries' exact escape strategy. What ingenious scheme does he have concealed? Gidries pivots, a self-assured grin spreading across his face. He declares he's been anticipating the prince's arrival. He asserts Kaix is indebted to him. A bewildered Kaix retorts that he owes Gidries absolutely nothing. The only thing he'll guarantee is the robustness of the rope used for his hanging. It won't break. But Gidries, far from foolish, contends that despite his current confinement, he alone possesses 2 decades of expertise administering Shakan's treasury. If the prince is paying him a visit, it must be for that very purpose. Kaix reminds him of his forfeited financial authority, but Gidries parries, inquiring about the prince's curiosity regarding the source of Shakan's colossal debt. Kaix's fury ignites as the self-satisfied treasurer remains blissfully unaware of his predicament. Meanwhile, Gidries wears a condescending smirk. Abruptly, Kaix summons a guard. He inquires whether a tormentor is available. The guard falters momentarily, but confirms the presence of one. Kaix commands him to retrieve the specialist. When the guard again hesitates, Kaix bellows, demanding to know if he appears to be jesting. Petrified, the guard scrambles to obey. He leaves a trail of dust in his wake. Seething, Kaix resolves that Gidries must comprehend the prevailing customs of this domain. Gidries swiftly deduces that the involvement of a professional torturer signifies grave danger. Kaix observes that someone of Gidries' ilk likely possesses a low threshold for agony. Kaix sneers and offers Gidras a sardonic farewell. Let's see if your fortitude impresses me, he challenges. Perhaps I'll prolong your suffering with a slow demise instead of a swift end. Gidras has reclaimed control. This adversary proves to be much more formidable than he anticipated. He promptly initiates. The Hashirans exploit Gerard to circumvent paying regal levies on their excavation endeavors. However, Kaix interjects, inquiring, why not simply inform the royal lineage about Gerard and implicate him in the fatalities? Alternatively, perhaps liquidate the debt entitlements prior to apprehending him? Gidras appears astonished. He's visibly awed by the proposition. That's a brilliant scheme. He stammers, a notion Wana hadn't previously entertained. Before Gidras can expound, the sentinel abruptly reappears. He proclaims the arrival of the realm's most proficient tormentor. Kaix beams with exhilaration. Meanwhile, Gidras intensifies his desperate pleas for clemency. I know the location of Gerard's hidden repository. He blurts out, momentarily capturing Kaix's attention. But before he can respond, the tormentor shoves Gidras to the floor. Silence, he commands. Gidras persists vehemently, proclaiming his honesty. I've toiled in Shikan for an eternity, making me the sole individual privy to the vault's whereabouts. Kaix grinds his boot into Gidras' face. Speak, he orders. Precisely where is this concealed chamber? Gidras hesitates, obviously attempting to delay. Kaix snarls, start talking. The torturer menacingly cracks his knuckles. You see, systematically shattering fingers is always an effective commencement. Overwhelmed by terror, Gidras confesses a past attempt to plunder the vault, but met with failure. Kaix swiftly surmises that Gidras didn't operate solo. Goldman corroborates this assertion, revealing he compensated some mercenaries with gold bullion. To aid him precisely, how much did you disperse? Kaix probes, 3,300. Kaix abruptly interjects, incredulous. Nay, 3,000 even. Gidras concludes weakly upon hearing this. Kaix erupts in a fit of laughter. The sound reverberates menacingly throughout the jail. The sentinel stationed outside the confinement chamber swallows hard, apprehensive. He comprehends that when the prince exhibits such a reaction, it invariably portends ill tidings. Kaix regains his composure, his tone glacial. 3,000 gold pieces? Considering the yearly income of this domain, from whence did you acquire such a sum? He indicts Gidras of pilfering funds from Shikan's coffers. Gidras hangs his head in shame, admitting he had no alternative. The allure of the opportunity was irresistible. He laments, if not for that accursed mystical sphere, I would have triumphed. Kaix narrows his gaze. What is this regarding a mystical sphere? Gidras elucidates that the orb was utilized to gain entry to the strong room. He divulges that replicating the sphere depleted 2,500 gold from his coffers. Kaix starts to deduce the truth. Iris-scamed, he states unequivocally, the brigands and Gerard Merzes were likely collaborate. Gidras vehemently shakes his head, asserting its impossibility. I witnessed it firsthand. Gerard employed the sphere to unlock the vault entrance. Kaix commands Gidras to disclose the vault's whereabouts. It's situated in the Gortith Highlands. Gidras responds. Kaix unfurls his map, and as Gidras confesses, he was deprived of sight during his endeavor. He's certain the vault lies within that vicinity. The prince pauses, lost in contemplation. Those surrounding him ponder why he remains motionless, gaze fixed on nothingness, engrossed in the map. Kaix discerns a promising area for exploration. It dawns on him that he requires someone acquainted with the Gortith Highlands. Recalling Layla's remark that her orphan squadron received training in Gortith, he devises a strategy, summoning the guard. He proclaims their imminent departure. Gidras, in desperation, cries out after him, insisting on knowing his destination. But Kaix departs without a word, as the guard slams the cell door shut with a resounding clang. Striding away, Kaix can't help but dwell on the 3,000 gold pieces purloined by Gidra, and how this guard likely pocketed his portion. His rage intensifies as he contemplates the matter further. He abruptly halts and summons Shu. The sentinel is startled. Shu anxiously inquires about his needs. Kaix nonchalantly alludes to the 3,000 gold Gidra pilfer. He probes whether Shu was aware of the theft. Feigning obliviousness, Shu vehemently refutes any knowledge. Kaix offers a sly grin and departs. I gleaned some intriguing information from Gitter's conversation. During your absence, he states enigmatically, I possess a magnanimous spirit. However, certain transgressions I cannot simply disregard. He departs, leaving Shu in a state of trepidation. Uncertainty gnaws at him. Does the prince possess more knowledge than he reveals? Kaix's mind swirls with conjectures. Yet he maintains a facade of composure. He grapples with a predicament, but recognizes this is merely the commencement. The guard crumples to the earth, lamenting about the gone pig. Guidres must have divulged everything during his absence. Desperate, he implores for pardon, vowing to never again betray a soul. But Kaix remains impassive. Only when the guard glances upward does he perceive the prince's departure. Unfazed, the guard dismisses it, redirecting his fury towards Guidres. Consumed by vengeance, she dashes towards the jail. Meanwhile, Kaix leans nonchalantly against a well, a smug grin playing on his lips. Abruptly, footsteps approach from the rear. His attention piqued, he pivots, arching a brow and inquiring about the newcomer's identity. From their garb, he discerns them as a knight, belonging to the Order of the Blue Lion. He questions the knight's presence there. The knight proclaims himself as Krot. Solemnly, he explains that Lord Russell tasked him with escorting the prince. Kaix instantly acknowledges this revelation. He activates his analytical system to assess Kraut's capabilities. To his astonishment, Kraut is revealed to be 26 years of age. A seasoned knight, he boasts a level of 52. Furthermore, he holds an S-rank classification, a truly exceptional combatant. Intrigued, Kaix contemplates why such a formidable individual was absent from the esteemed heroes of destiny. The moniker Kraut Salam evokes no recollection. This leads Kaix to surmise that he must have perished prematurely in the game's chronology. Possessing a potential score surpassing 700, Kraut could have effortlessly secured a position among the top 100 most formidable individuals across the continent. His military standing, coupled with his innate prowess, renders him an invaluable resource. Kaix ponders that Kraut might even possess ties to the Notorious, the Messenger of Death, a notorious in-game persona, renowned for ruthlessly decimating adversaries, while perpetually concealing his visage. However, Kraut's jovial disposition and imposing physique didn't align with the depiction of the slender, menacing figure detailed in the game's lore. Choosing to dismiss the thought, Kaix concedes that Kraut's presence is advantageous, irrespective of his history. He recognizes that having someone like Kraut on his side is a boon. Kraut's voice jolts the prince from his reverie. His words shatter Kaix's train of thought. Kraut remarks that the prince must have been lost in a daydream, as he'd been repeatedly murmuring Kraut's name under his breath. Before Kaix can formulate a response, Kraut announces that a tradesman named Gerard Mercies seeks an audience with him. At this, Kaix's eyes constrict. Gerard Mercies, the very individual Gidras had referenced previously. The man's crippling financial burden to Mushik. He's also the sole individual with admittance to the enigmatic concealed flaw. Now things are escalating. Kaix advances, gesturing for Kraut to accompany him. As they traverse the hallways, Kaix scrutinizes Kraut's somewhat ungainly mannerisms and deduces that he couldn't possibly be the harbinger of demise. Moments later, they reach the conference chamber. Kaix enters, received by Gerard, who places a hand upon his chest and presents himself as the director of a modest mercantile establishment. Kaix courteously replies, mentioning he's acquainted with Gerard's esteemed standing in commerce. Gifted entrepreneurs such as yourself are perpetually appreciated, he adds. Gerard profoundly inclines his head, expressing gratitude for the prince's gracious remarks. Kaix gets straight to the point, inquiring why a prosperous entrepreneur like Gerard would desire an audience with someone of his standing. I currently hold no official position of power, Kaix states. Kaix clarifies, if this pertains to commerce, I lack jurisdiction over territorial affairs. Gerard releases an uneasy chuckle. He concedes that while Kaix's statement is accurate, Chikin is presently under Count Russell's administration. However, the territory's destiny lies with Kaix. There isn't a soul in Chikin who contests your judgments, Prince Kaix, Gerard asserts confidently. Prince Kaix. Gerard reiterates with conviction. Maintaining his modesty, Kaix retorts. Don't overestimate my influence. I'm merely a minor player. Insignificant, Kaix adds. Gerard laughs. He indicates that Kaix is exhibiting excessive humility. It's common knowledge that the succession is predetermined, even in the absence of an official declaration. Gerard concurs with a nod. He acknowledges that such hearsay aligns with his own intelligence. The merchant expresses regret if his remarks were presumptuous. Kaix observes that Gerard is undoubtedly a proficient entrepreneur. After all, an individual lacking crucial intelligence wouldn't endure in this profession. However, Gerard finds himself perplexed. The prince before him contradicts the hearsay of a naive Kaix. The individual he perceives is astute, calculating, and considerably more mature than anticipated. Nevertheless, Gerard commends Kaix's striking visage, conceding that the gossip regarding his beauty was not embellished. Blushing, Gerard proclaims Kaix to be precisely his preference, sensing a menacing undertone in Gerard's words. Kaix abruptly rises, his tone resolute. I despise squandering time, he declares. If you don't arrive at the crux of the matter, I'm departing. Gerard promptly expresses remorse, recognizing he cannot jeopardize this encounter. Although he remains captivated by the prince's allure, his foremost objective is establishing a functional rapport with him, now reseated. Kaix scrutinizes Gerard intently and commands him to speak candidly. Gerard elucidates that he desires to bolster the prince, but his principal motive for this meeting is the colossal debt bequeathed by the former count. Feigned obliviousness. Kaix asserts that he's utterly unaware of any such debt. The individual responsible for fiscal management is incarcerated for his transgressions. He adds flippantly, Kraut. Standing nearby, Kraut recoils at Kaix's nonchalant nose-picking, deeming it profoundly repulsive. Unperturbed, Gerard offers a wry smile, having foreseen this rejoinder. He understands that Kaix is far from ingenuous, and this dialogue is merely commencing. Gerard initiates his explanation, a cunning grin spreading across his face. This all originated a mere 5 years prior. Therefore, your ignorance is implausible. A wide grin spreads across his face. He revels in the moment, believing this is the culmination of his meticulous planning. He savors the anticipated despair on the face of this insufferable little princeling, the sheer terror that will consume him when confronted with an insurmountable debt. Gerard eagerly anticipates Kaix's imminent collapse into a weeping mess, his features contorting in a paroxysm of utter helplessness. He continues his pronouncements, clarifying the stipulations of the 3-year agreement. Full payment may be levied at any given time. Regrettably, I must apprise you that within a fortnight, 60,000 gold coins are due. Kraut recoils, visibly stunned by the exorbitant sum. Meanwhile, Kaix remains impassive, his expression inscrutable. Gerard presumes that the prince is merely feigning composure. He finds this attempted display of stoicism utterly amusing. He basks in the spectacle, resuming his inner monologue. Cease your flirtatious advances towards my protagonist. Gerard, where are the wafers, Alex? However, Alex remains silent. Kraut, anxious, finally speaks. Nervously, he implores Gerard to contemplate postponing the due date. But Gerard swiftly rejects the proposition. A hush descends upon them, shattering the silence. Gerard speaks with feigned sympathy. It's truly regrettable, but Shekin's domain has been dwindling rapidly. We demonstrated benevolence by granting over a year for recuperation, yet nothing has altered. Now that Prince Kaix is assuming authority, how can we reciprocate this courtesy? Kaix discerns Gerard's pretense of magnanimity, observing how skillfully he conceals his coercion behind civility. Prince Kaix rises with dignity, retorting, perhaps you're oblivious, but Chitsan's yearly earnings surpass 6,000 gold coins. Locating someone disposed to loan 60,000 gold will not be problematic. Kraut's bewilderment intensifies, incredulous at such an assertion. Gerard stands brimming with elation. That's magnificent news. It appears there's nothing to fret about then. But inwardly, Gerard recognizes the arduousness of securing alliances for such a substantial sum. He declares his imminent return to retrieve the compensation and departs. He exudes confidence, certain this domain will soon be within his clutches. As he bows, a malevolent scheme takes root in Gerard's mind. Soon enough, This spoiled, aristocratic whelp will be prostrate before me. Perhaps I'll auction him off at the slave market, but not before savoring my reward. He takes his leave, expressing gratitude to Kaix and extending well wishes. Kaix observes his exit unperturbed. Meanwhile, Kraut remains motionless, attempting to comprehend the events that just transpired. Kraut abruptly exclaims, 60,000 gold pieces. How can you remain so composed amidst this chaos? Kaix is already orchestrating his subsequent maneuver. He's aware that the clandestine vault within Gorna possesses the key. The map had previously indicated remnants and riches within the vicinity. The obstacle now resides in traversing the treacherous terrain of Ellen. The Gorna Highlands are especially precarious, inhabited by sapient beings like the Risketh. It's a domain individuals shun at any price. Beyond the fortress walls, Kraut inquires about Kaix's intended course of action. Kaix offers a sly grin, understanding it's crucial to locate someone intimately familiar with Gorna, someone like Layla. The scene transitions to a sentinel, posted outside a confinement zone. He perceives Kaix and anxiously offers a salutation. The prince commends the guard's diligence and requests an audience with the captive. Kraut opts to proceed while Kaix attends to this matter. As the door swings open, Kaix is astonished by the room's unexpected tidiness. Someone's been tidying up, a voice remarks. It's none other than Layla. She stands tall, exuding her usual confidence. At last, she returns after her peculiar escapades with Gerard. Alex commends her appearance, remarking with a smirk, "You look fantastic." She haughtily replies, "Naturally, I do." As you can plainly see, Kraut interjects, cautioning her to moderate her tone when addressing the prince. However, Layla and Kaix simply exchange knowing glances. She raises the subject of the toxin he provided, stating it originated from Seti's marionette. "You deceived me, didn't you?" Kaix is impressed. He concedes, "You deduced it quicker than anticipated." Taking a seat, she inquires about his presence. "You sought me out for a reason, I presume." She leans in provocatively, purring. "I no longer heed your commands, but a moment of shared intimacy might sway my decision." Kraut instantly rebukes her impudence. Kaix, unperturbed, gets straight to the point. "I offer you a chance at survival." Intrigued, Layla presses for further explanation. Kaix elucidates that upon her release, Layla will be eliminated. Layla appears bewildered. This prompts Kaix to elaborate further. She should already comprehend the precariousness of her situation, considering her family's conflict with the Hoshurnus. "That's evident," Layla retorts. "You coerced the soul Hera Hashirin to be sealed as mana." Kaix affirms, declaring, "She was pivotal to that triumph, and should grasp the peril she faces." Finally, comprehension dawns upon her. "The Hashirins will seek my demise due to my testimony, won't they?" "Precisely." Kaix affirms that revitalizing Rumbine's mana is unattainable and devoid of it. The Hashirins have zero prospect of subjugating Chikan. No chance whatsoever. No ruler permits the survival of someone who sabotages their ambitions, particularly an individual like yourself. Having served nobility for years, Layla had observed countless aristocrats perishing ignominiously. Yet, she never anticipated suffering the same fate. Abruptly, she lunges across the table, seizing Kaix. Kraut instantly becomes rigid, poised to intercede. Layla charges towards the prince, bellowing, "Perish!" Caught unawares, Kaix appears genuinely apprehensive. However, Kraut will not permit any harm to befall his ward. In that instant, he acts, stamping down with his massive foot, and slams her violently against the wall, labeling her a despicable cutthroat, and demanding to know how she dares to defy the young lord in such a manner. Alex expresses his gratitude, but adds that there's no need to so thoroughly disgrace the unfortunate girl. After all, he owes his current standing as the heir apparent to her actions. He then elucidates that typically, those who shatter someone's illusions garner more resentment than those who plunge individuals into despondency. The rationale behind this, he explains, is rooted in convenience. A multitude of people subscribe to the notion that dwelling in a fabrication, even fleetingly, is preferable. However, he offers her a smile and remarks that judging by her evident tenacity for survival, she doesn't strike him as one to embrace such a mindset. She vehemently denies it, exclaiming that she will not perish under any circumstance. He responds with a grin, stating that if that's truly the case, he possesses a method to make her valuable. provided she assists him with his necessary tasks. In return, she'll receive safeguard in the interim, and should she have kin, he'll ensure their well-being as well. However, Layla misinterprets, inquiring if, by chance, he's menacing her loved ones. He rises, a bewildered expression painted across his face. He implores her to avoid misconstruing his words, because if that were his intention, she would already be deceased. Assassins of her caliber are ubiquitous. The young woman acknowledges the veracity of his statement. To a nobleman like him, she's merely an instrument. She then questions his specific interest in her. There must be a rationale. He's expending considerable effort to sway her. Our protagonist states the primary reason is the excessive exertion required to locate a replacement. The secondary reason stems from a prior remark she made. With that, he departs. He prefaces his explanation with a proposition. He'll grant her 60 seconds to contemplate. Should she dissent within that time frame, that minute's grace will buy her the very liberty she so desperately covets. But Layla discerns the grim reality. This supposed freedom carries a fatal price tag. She's trapped. Fleeing this place guarantees death at the hands of the rival clan. Submitting to this diminutive, irritating figurehead was abhorrent. But presently, she's devoid of alternatives. With resolute acceptance, she declares her comprehension. Given the entrenched feud between the factions, allying with Chi-Kan proves the more advantageous gambit. A smirk graces our protagonist's lips. He commends her for finally embracing logic. However, placing a hand on her hip, she retorts. She'll not be a mere underling. She demands enlistment as a fully fledged mercenary, and she wouldn't tolerate a weakling like him. Suddenly issuing her commands, Krot intervenes, demanding she demonstrate respect for the young heir. She offers an apology, claiming it was merely a jest, now unified under a common banner. Such behavior is unnecessary. Or perhaps, did he derive pleasure from assaulting his comrades? Poor Krot's fury only intensifies. The two resume their heated exchange. Abruptly, Alex inquires about a prior remark she made regarding the her familial training grounds, situated within the Golden Territories. She recalls uttering those words to him, and inquires about the relevance of this information. But Kaix interjects, addressing Croft, that he requires a comprehensive map of the vicinity, encompassing the entire surrounding terrain, because the miniature map he possesses is only visible to him through a small aperture. Croft declares that an immense map exists within the military council chambers. He nudges our protagonist, urging him forward. However, glancing back, he notices our hero remains stationary. Grinning mischievously, Croft promptly questions if perhaps he's unfamiliar with the route. Kaix asserts that he does know, but prefers having a vanguard for protection. Meanwhile, Layla stands there, utterly bewildered, unable to comprehend their squabble. Moments later, within the castle, they finally reach the strategic command center. Our protagonist, beaming with curiosity, surveys the room. Krot announces that the chamber houses the continent of Ellen's most classified military intelligence. It holds all of Ellen's confidential military secrets. AR, boy, immediately searches for the Golda region. Upon locating it, he inquires about the area's significance. Krot responds that it's a notorious territory. Currently, a fierce territorial dispute rages between the Hashiran clan and the Baron of the Erebon lineage. The source of the conflict, lucrative, high-grade copper deposits. Our hero questions whether Baron Erebon is their ally. The man affirms his allegiance. A look of bewilderment washes over our hero's face as he wonders about the map's accuracy and currentness. Layla suggests it might be somewhat obsolete. However, she adds that no major alterations have occurred. Suddenly, comprehension dawns upon her as to the reason for her presence. Our protagonist inquires if she possesses the ability to navigate solely by consulting the cartographic representation. She responds with an unequivocal affirmative. Her formative years were spent frolicking within that particular domain. However, curiosity piqued, she seeks clarification regarding his fascination with the Golden Territories. He elucidates that his objective lies in exploring ancient remnants concealed within those lands. A perplexed expression crosses her face as she retorts that no such relics exist in that locale. Kaix, lost in contemplation, inquires if perchance elders caution her against venturing into forbidden zones. A momentary pause ensues. Then, A flicker of recognition illuminates her countenance as she recalls such warnings. Seizing the opportunity, Kaix probes further, inquiring about the commencement of military training by the Hashiran clan in that area. She expresses bewilderment at the line of questioning, but based on her attainment of the 6th echelon, she deduces that a minimum of 15 years has elapsed. He poses a final query regarding the genesis of the territorial conflict. A German soldier mentions that it also commenced 15 years prior. At this juncture, Layla abruptly nudges him, inquiring if he grasps the lad's implication. He responds in the negative. She feels exasperated, saddled with a simpleton. They resume their squabble, until Kaix interjects, stating that raising an army requires substantial funds. They wouldn't have commenced mobilizing troops out of the blue without a compelling rationale. The obtuse girl reiterates her question about the boy's point. The German soldier urges her to deduce that they somehow acquired significant wealth. They secured a substantial financial windfall. Kalak affirms that's precisely the case. 15 years prior, the Hashiran clan unearthed a novel revenue stream, and they presumably utilized those resources to finance their new legions. Once the battalions were prepared, they were deployed across numerous domains. Precisely what transpired with Layla. She conveys her comprehension, but inquires what could be the correlation between that financial source and the ruins he seeks. Kaix explains that silver veins are frequently discovered in proximity to copper deposits. Moreover, certain copper ores may also harbor traces of silver. Krud inquires if he's insinuating that the Hashiran clan is clandestinely extracting silver. Such an act would constitute a grave offense. Kaix affirms and urges him to contemplate the implications. The regional legislation dictates that any discovered gold or silver invariably belongs to the reigning monarchy, regardless of its location. However, it would be naive to presume if only every aristocrat were so righteous. Crowd inquires about the connection to the ancient ruins. Our protagonist responds that he's already aware of the nature of these ruins. They are ideal for concealing this kind of clandestine information. Regrettably, he can't divulge to Crowd that he possesses prior knowledge on the subject. Layla, demonstrating increasing astuteness, questions the relevance of all this to him. She had assumed an assault on that location was beyond his capabilities. Shakan's domain lacked the necessary provisions for such an undertaking. Crowd becomes exasperated, grudgingly admitting that this is likely the reality. Layla remains adamant, asserting that even if they instigated a conflict, the crown would seize everything upon discovering the pure silver. Kaix's words would be meaningless. They would forfeit any potential gains. They wouldn't profit from divulging this intelligence to an outsider. Moreover, his domain is teetering on the brink of ruin. Both of them stand there, utterly bewildered. They yearn to understand his proposition. That's when he elucidates that since the acquisition of the funds was illicit, even if they pilfered everything, the Hashirans wouldn't dare lodge a complaint with the monarch. Later that very evening, they congregated outside the fortress. Russell declared to our protagonist that it was sheer lunacy to include someone as green as Crod. He urged further contemplation of this scheme. Reckless action, he cautioned, could be perilous. Kaix concurred. Russell's presence would ensure greater security. However, a budding talent like Kraut required nurture. The naive youth flushed with embarrassment at the Lord's faith in his abilities. Alex continued by asserting that it was fraught with danger for both of them to depart the domain. At such a crucial juncture, Russell is astonished, then promptly offers his apologies. Abruptly, he pivots to Kraut, commanding him to attend to the young lord with unwavering diligence. However, the simpleton merely concurs, his tongue lolling out. Exasperated, Russell cuffs him on the head, impressing upon him the gravity of the situation. Moments later, he summons everyone. He elucidates that the young lord's injuries are still recent. Nevertheless, he intends this journey for the betterment of the realm. Therefore, every soldier present must serve him with absolute loyalty. Kaix recognizes that no soldier desires to follow someone so frail, someone who once attempted self-annihilation. Securing the allegiance of these individuals was also his responsibility. In the meantime, Layla silently observes from the periphery. Moments later, they draw near a well. Croc descends, and our protagonist follows close behind. Upon reaching the bottom, He explains that this tunnel leads to an exit from the fortress. However, the passage proves longer than anticipated. It stretches farther than he had envisioned. Kaix brushes past, urging them to hasten their pace. With that, the group embarks on their journey through the cavern's inky blackness. After some time, Croc glances upward, announcing their arrival. Our hero is visibly fatigued. Croc lifts the cover and extends a hand to assist our weary protagonist. Suddenly, he finds himself outside, or rather, within a dwelling. Croc clarifies that they are inside a derelict watermill, long since abandoned. Now truly outside, our protagonist is astonished. Croc had already procured several horses laden with supplies. Kraut summons Lord and instructs him to mount the steed. However, Kaix interjects, forbidding him from using such a formal title, especially in this location. Addressing him as Lord outside the castle walls would be foolish, particularly when venturing into potentially hostile territory. Henceforth, he is to be addressed solely as young master. The soldiers don commoner's attire, though doubts linger about the disguise's effectiveness. He then beckons Kraut, inquiring if all the requested preparations have been made. Kraut affirms, albeit with a hint of reluctance. He produces a malodorous cloak, questioning the necessity of such a garment. Armoy retorts that if he prefers, he could wear a porter's uniform. However, Kaix would then be compelled to impersonate Layla's new principal spouse. Kraut vehemently objects, declaring it utterly unacceptable. He refuses to allow the young master to be accompanied by a hired killer. His words cause every head in the room to swivel towards her. Kaix recognizes that the imbecile is divulging more than he ought to. He storms off in a huff once again, internally insisting he spoke nothing but the truth. However, at Kaix's request, he extends his hand, inquiring if my lady would grace him with her presence. She curtly demands he cease with the formalities and step aside. Get out of my way, she snaps. Kaix observes that the pair's rapport is far from amicable. He needed to somehow de-escalate the tension between his teammates. A duo like this could prove invaluable if they could operate in synergy, but their incessant bickering would only exacerbate the situation. Ultimately, one would either perish or abandon the group. The gravity of the heroes of destiny struck him. What began as mere sport now possessed an unsettling realism. He also had to devise a strategy to assist Layla in demonstrating her capabilities to the remainder of the squad. Perhaps he felt compelled to act discreetly. With that, he urges Kraut to expedite their departure and maximize the separation between themselves and the fortress. Prior to sunrise, Kraut summons the group, and the carriages commence their traversal through the woodland. They slumber upon the earth, journeying deeper into the sylvan depths. They pause briefly at a modest mercantile establishment. They traverse a township and subsequently navigate a barricade. They once again seek repose within the forest's embrace. After a period, the assembly congregates around a crackling campfire. Kraut declares that this represents the final rustic settlement they shall encounter on their journey. Kaix then directs everyone to make ready, as the true conflict is poised to commence on the morrow. Dawn arrives, and he cautions everyone that the genuine endeavor is imminent. Clad in their armor, they embark upon their mission. Once more, they occupy the wagons, adhering to the designated route. However, Kraut's countenance shifts noticeably. He informs our protagonist that several scouts are already commencing their return. A man declares that in the approaching woods, there exists a cluster of Sasquatches. Kraut inquires about their numbers. The man responds, 5. Abruptly, a tap on his shoulder startles him. He pivots to find Kaix requesting a boost into the tree. The man, with an enigmatic grin, hoists him by the waist and joyously leaps upward from his arboreal vantage point. Kaix scrutinizes the monster's encampment from a distance. The shelter is visible, teeming with skeletal-bearing apes. This endeavor is clearly not going to be effortless. Kaix questions their strategy. Kraut states that they will likely unleash a barrage of incendiary arrows. However, our hero appears apprehensive, questioning Kraut's sanity for proposing such a tactic. Layla, within earshot, absorbs every word. Kraut expresses remorse, but asserts that this is the most secure method to safeguard the lives of his subordinates. They couldn't jeopardize the mission by attempting an alternative approach. However, Helix possesses the knowledge that no individual on this planet possesses greater expertise regarding these entities than himself. Yet, currently he lacks the means to persuade the troops. Kraut seizes him and descends from the treetop, pledging to devise a more judicious strategy, while Helix contemplates a method to sway not only Kraut, but also the remaining soldiers. Layla remains silently attentive. She observes several men scrutinizing the blueprint they intend to execute, and instantly discerns that their scheme is utterly flawed. In essence, their tactic consists solely of attempting to eliminate the primates. Helix understands that if he proffers a recommendation, and they disregard it, it accurately predicts that the situation will deteriorate. Layla scrutinizes him as he surveys the crowd, seeking a method to validate himself to these individuals. Positioned near the wagon, Layla materializes, expressing a desire for a parley. She cautions that the strategy is doomed to failure, and the entire team will perish, even if Kraut endures. Not everyone possesses his prowess. Kaix states that this is already apparent to him. She then inquires about his reticence and his reluctance to divulge any information. He attempts to clarify that he isn't silent, but rather strategizing a persuasive approach. Abruptly, Layla interjects with an idea, and he encourages her to elaborate. She elucidates that Sasquatches exhibit profound devotion to their offspring. Consequently, targeting the females and young will inevitably provoke a protective response from the males. The monster's counterattack would commence only after they possess absolute certainty of the children's safety. Naturally, our protagonist anticipated this. He inquires about the remaining steps of the strategy. She finds his lack of astonishment peculiar and states that she requires clarification on a certain matter. The initial objective was merely to traverse discreetly and eliminate the creatures without needless bloodshed. He affirms this. Their true destination lies elsewhere. She elucidates that under these circumstances, an alternative approach exists. Currently, the creatures obstruct the passage, believing it to be a secure location. However, by targeting the females and offspring, the front line will be diverted. Our hero had already contemplated this tactic, but a crucial element remains unanswered. He poses the question, who will undertake this task? Who will single-handedly confront the creatures? Divert them all, he bellows, cautioning that it's essentially a suicide run. Unexpectedly, she volunteers for the task. He appears momentarily perplexed. He clarifies that from the outset, when she proposed the idea, he planned to assume the responsibility himself. He inquires if she perhaps intends to utilize a specific herbal remedy. Bewildered, she asks how he discerned her plan. He states it's evident as otherwise. She wouldn't embrace such a perilous undertaking. He remarks that he's undergone significant changes recently. Abruptly, he's seized by a coughing fit. He adds that if successful, it's a viable strategy. She confidently taps her chest, assuring him not to fret. She spent her formative years in that area, so failure is improbable. Helix questions her motive for such extreme assistance. She simply states, if the Chikan lineage perishes, she perishes as well. Our protagonist cautions that it will prove challenging for her to garner acknowledgement from the rest. He inquires if she's amenable to this. She seemingly concurs, and he responds, very well, but prior to your departure, I wish to assist you with a matter. She questions his intent, and he gestures towards the skyline. He asks her to identify what lies beyond, and if she's familiar with the territory. She affirms her knowledge, encouraging him to inquire freely. She possesses comprehensive understanding of that locale. He then indicates a precise location. Around there, she confirms, with unwavering certainty, that it's a goblin encampment. Additionally, it serves as a hunting domain for Sasquatches. Our hero expresses gratitude, affirming his reliance on her. His true motive is to instill a sense of purpose and tranquility within her. She simply replies that she's content to be of assistance. Their conversation persists, while Krop observes from afar. The two engage in a brief exchange, her laughter punctuated by rosy cheeks. A blush creeps onto our protagonist's face as well. Suddenly, she extends a hand towards his visage. This assassin is here to slay hearts, it seems. Our hero's face ignites crimson once more. He shuts his eyes, then reopens them, only to discover she was merely plucking a stray leaf from his hair. He flushes completely, scarlet from ear to ear. Bewildered, he struggles to comprehend his own reaction. He's a mystery even to himself. Perhaps it's a consequence of a life lived in seclusion, a solitary existence in the realm of otaku culture. Kraut materializes, inquiring about the unfolding scene. Our protagonist brusquely dismisses him, claiming it's inconsequential. He then instructs Kraut to ready Layla's gear. He adds that she'll be embarking on an assignment, and her absence should go unquestioned. Kraut presses for details about the undertaking, harboring a distrust for Layla. However, Kaix urges them to have faith in him. He places his trust in her, affirming their alliance. The knight appears reluctant to concede, but states that he'll make an exception this time. Layla lets something fall to the earth and reassures them, dispelling any concern. She declares that she's already equipped with her own provisions. Everyone gazes at her, a hint of awkwardness in the air. This assassin truly exudes a perilous aura. Her manner of ambulation raises eyebrows. Kaix appears on the verge of a complete meltdown. Simultaneously, Crud inquires about the nature of the situation. She dons her gauntlets and boots. Let's acknowledge the obvious. The lower portion, specifically around the gluteal region, is devoid of cover. Only a minimal amount of armor is present. She then retrieves an object and proceeds to smear it across her face. Apparently, this concoction is intended to divert the attention of Sasquatches. Undeniably, it emits a profoundly foul odor, and Crop firmly clamps his nostrils shut. Meanwhile, Layla remains utterly indifferent to her attire, despite the stares directed at her due to the pungent odor. Her sole focus is on accomplishing the mission. Her anxieties prove to be unfounded. Alex then inquires of the prince if they can commence the operation. He suggests she enlist the aid of some soldiers. However, she's convinced they wouldn't heed her commands. Therefore, it's deemed unwise. He replies that under those circumstances, she has complete autonomy. With agility, she leaps gracefully from branch to branch. Kraut pivots, asserting that they too must press onward. The army traverses the woodland. Kraut proclaims that they will conclude this with a single decisive blow. All stand prepared. Yet, Kaix remains plagued by apprehension regarding the impending battle. One of the Sasquatches detects something amiss. As it rotates, Kraut lunges towards it. He connects with the initial strike, but it's superficial. Alex ponders why. He opted to slash, when a thrust would have been more appropriate. Kraut is swiftly enveloped by the Sasquatch's imposing silhouette, which unleashes a barrage of blows. He's hurled backward, and the imbecile grins, exclaiming that this brawl is far more exhilarating than on a computer. Abruptly, Abe begins pounding his chest, leaving everyone bewildered. A massive cacophony of birdsong fills the air, and a growing multitude descends upon them. Alex contemplates that perhaps incinerating the entire woodland wouldn't have been such a detrimental notion after all. Meanwhile, Kraut surges forward, zealously summoning the Blue Lion Legion. Our protagonist implores them to halt, pleading not to be abandoned. Just then, two individuals, Albu and Thomas, intercede, positioning themselves in front. They caution him against venturing too far. The military engages the ape horde. Kraut readies himself. He infuses his blade with potent energy and lunges towards the enemy. He declares his intent to swiftly conclude the battle before the behemoth can respond. He strikes, unleashing a surge of energy that slams into the air. The resulting detonation engulfs the entire forest. As the smoke begins to dissipate, Kraut exhibits signs of fatigue. However, he successfully felled the first Sasquatch. He stands triumphantly, glancing backward. In the meantime, our hero contemplates why this fool seems to relish the combat. Suddenly, he's jolted by the sight of another Sasquatch, brutalizing one of the knights. The knight's blade clatters to the earth. He lunges to retrieve it, but the behemoth descends, poised to crush his spine. In the nick of time, Deer Kraut bursts onto the scene, delivering a swift kick to the creature's maw. He urges the knight to reclaim his weapon. The man expresses his gratitude for the rescue. Kraut presses his attack, but a grim realization dawns upon him. Eliminating them individually will prove a daunting task. Witnessing the soldier's predicament, he understands the gravity of the danger. He severs another limb, provoking a thunderous roar from the colossal beast. The predicament lies in his solitude and the encroaching fatigue. Furthermore, even the elder primates possess unexpected strength. He resolves to attempt immobilizing some of his adversaries. He slides beneath a leg, slashing at its heel. The behemoth bellows, and another adversary collapses. A surge of exhilaration courses through the troops, witnessing a glimmer of hope for victory. But Kraut senses a lurking disquiet. His gaze sweeps across the woodland. They tally 8, yet one remains unaccounted for. Suddenly, a noise from his flank catches his attention. A colossal albino beast charges headlong towards the prince. Most alarmingly, the monstrosity is in full stride, leaving Kaix with no avenue for retreat. Krat lunges forward, but Albu intercepts him. He commands the prince to remain behind. From afar, Krat unleashes another voltaic blast. Momentarily, everyone is engulfed in blinding light. As the haze dissipates, a hand materializes. Erupting from the smoke, it slams into Albu's chest. He is sent hurtling backward, leaving a gaping chasm in the earth. Kaix is stunned, realizing he was the intended target. Thomas interposes himself, ordering the prince to stay put. Meanwhile, the creature continues its relentless advance. Krod is visibly tiring, his strength waning. He lunges forward with another assault, while Thomas remains steadfastly at the prince's side. Suddenly, Kaix's voice cuts through the chaos. He urgently requests Thomas's aid in subduing his formidable Sasquatch. The stakes are dire. Kaix warns of imminent demise for everyone if the beast isn't quelled. Thomas hesitates, reluctant to forsake his duty of safeguarding the prince. The risk of leaving the prince vulnerable is too great. Yet, Kaix delivers a grim reminder. No reinforcements are forthcoming. Their sole opportunity for triumph lies in the present moment. He seizes Thomas's arm, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. Further casualties will decimate their ranks, leaving them critically outnumbered. Thomas acknowledges the truth in Kaix's words, but his knightly oath compels him to remain. He cannot simply abandon his charge, the prince, to peril. Then, Kaix's voice erupts in a roar, demanding to know how much longer Thomas intends to disobey a direct command. The weight of Kaix's insubordination accusation forces Thomas to confront the reality of his defiance. He has no recourse. Ultimately, a knight must yield to his superior's decree. With a heavy heart, Thomas pledges his compliance. Kaix expresses his gratitude and sprints away. He trails the impact crater, drawing nearer to Albu. The unfortunate man lies incapacitated on the ground, his condition dire. Kaix is aghast at the gruesome spectacle. A single strike had severed Albu's arm. His protective armor is utterly demolished. Kaix rushes to Albu's side, urging him to remain conscious. He assures him that he will staunch the bleeding. He administers a healing potion orally. However, he realizes it's insufficient. Upon removing the shattered armor, he discovers a gaping wound in Albu's abdomen. A Sasquatch's brutal blow landed squarely, inflicting catastrophic internal hemorrhaging. The predicament is that these rudimentary potions are inadequate. A skilled healer is urgently required. Retrieving Albu's sword, Kaix implores him to stay awake. He promises a swift return and vows to ensure his survival. Moments later, in a different sector of the woods, he conceals himself behind a thick trunk, scrutinizing the Sasquatches. This was the designated hunting grounds for goblins that Layla had previously indicated. A mere glimpse of them fills him with dread as he witnesses the beasts pummeling their chests. The creatures were far more formidable and repulsive than he had envisioned. He strikes the tree in frustration, the thought of perishing here overwhelming him. Terror grips him, despite his desire to have faith in Layla's strategy. He trusts that she has meticulously laid the snares. If all proceeds flawlessly, he will remain unscathed. However, this is not the familiar realm, where he sits passively behind a computer screen. Gasping for air, the image of Albu's lifeless form flashes in his mind. He reassures himself, "It's all right. I will not succumb." He musters his courage, affirming, "I can do this." With newfound resolve, he emerges from his concealment. He bellows towards the Sasquatches, bellowing that their demise had come. The primate lunged, but in a flash, he yanked a lever, unleashing a volley of spears from the rear. The projectiles pierced the beast's ribcage, sending it crashing to the earth. But no sooner had the first one fallen than another monstrosity took notice, sprinting towards him. Kaix narrowly evaded the onslaught and deftly triggered another lever. This time a rope descended swiftly, body slamming the colossal creature into the ground. These were razor-sharp spider vines, further enhanced by a prior request for Layla to lace the barbs with siren venom, a potent and aesthetically striking toxin. Observing the ape's newfound feebleness, he deduced the venom's efficacy in advance. He seized his blade and plunged it directly into the creature's cranium. The sensation of steel cleaving bone was vastly different from the virtual realm. Upon drawing the blade, he was drenched in crimson. The entire scene was utterly repulsive. He never envisioned having to resort to such extremes. Yet, there he stood, extinguishing the creature's life force. He then lunged towards the other beast, delivering another fatal blow. He denounced them as abhorrent. But amidst his internal diatribe, A goblin lurked from above, observing him. The monstrous being stealthily crept up behind him, leaving no opportunity for a response. Blood erupted. As he whirled around, he saw someone had interposed themselves. He collapsed as the goblin advanced. Glancing sideways, he saw Albu, his savior, once more. This individual was clearly in dire straits. Consumed by fury, Alex charged towards the goblin. He attempted a slash, but the diminutive green creature evaded the attack, leaving him striking only air. The beast sidesteps, nearly slicing him with a swift swipe. He narrowly evades the blow, but his shirt is ripped. A sudden realization dawns upon him. His survival hinged on the creature's stunted limbs. With another arc of his blade, his hand trembles, betraying his weakened physique. He struggles to compose himself. At least his reach surpasses the creature's twofold. Maintaining distance is paramount to survival. A glimmer of hope ignites. Victory might be attainable. The goblin lunges anew. This time, his sword connects, grazing the goblin's ear. He braces for the inevitable impalement. But at the last moment he dives aside. The near loss of an arm sends shivers down his spine. Before he can regain his footing, the monster relentlessly advances once more. Another strike lands, inflicting another gash upon the goblin's ear. The goblin targets his shoulder again, but this time he intercepts the attack with a well-placed kick. The instant the beast is deprived of its weapon, he bellows a death wish upon it, and plunges the blade deep into its thorax. Utterly spent as the creature's legs buckle, he relinquishes the sword and crumples to his knees before the monstrosity. Confronted with the carnage wrought by his own hands, he is overcome by a wave of nausea. This was a stark departure from the virtual realm of the game, and the chilling fear of imminent death had gripped him. Abruptly, the system general materializes, showering him with accolades. He had vanquished a foe far exceeding his own strength, and would be bestowed with supplementary bonuses. Moreover, he had also triumphed over an F-class monster. Consequently, his level surges from 8 to 11. Unexpectedly, a voice pierces the silence. He shifts his gaze to find Krat inquiring about his well-being. But Krat's attention is swiftly drawn to the lifeless Sasquatches and the impaled goblin. Krat cautiously circumnavigates him, curious if he truly emerged unscathed. At that moment, Kaix inquires about the status of the remaining squad members. Krat responds that after eliminating 2 Sasquatches, the others retreated seemingly by chance. However, Kaix suspects it wasn't mere fortune. He realizes Layla's strategy was the key. Suddenly a thought strikes him, and he questions the whereabouts of the soldier who accompanied him. Krat asks if he's referring to Albu. Our protagonist confirms, yes. He then gestures sideways, stating, he's right over there. Kaix finds it inconceivable that no casualties occurred during the operation. But upon seeing Albu's remains, he expresses remorse. He shoulders the blame, lamenting his lack of caution. Krat stands silently, observing. Then, he assures Kaix that he bears no responsibility. Moreover, Albu perished valiantly in combat. Kaix admonishes him, urging him to cease his absurd behavior. Death was merely the cessation of existence. There was no inherent nobility in it. Krat recognizes this as the lad's inaugural experience. With the loss of a comrade under his command, he empathizes with the youth's anguish. However, shortly thereafter, additional corpses are presented before him. Kaix falters, inquiring as to the events that transpired. Ultimately, Krat reports 3 fatalities and a single injury. Considering the dire circumstances, the outcome was deemed favorable. But Kaix can only attribute the blame to himself. He should have imparted his insights regarding this realm forcefully, without trepidation of revelation. Moreover, his survival hinged solely upon Layla's stratagems and Albu's intervention as his protector. He tightly constricts his fists and erupts in a vociferous outburst. The assembled soldiers observe him intently. He then inquires about the subsequent course of action. The remains lie on the battlefield. Krat clarifies that if the corpse isn't too severely damaged, they can retrieve it. Kaix simply commands to recover the body, regardless of its condition. Krat pivots to issue the directive. He observes everyone weeping. The troops are deeply affected because in this realm, it's uncommon for nobility to demonstrate concern for their subordinates. Witnessing his actions, they vow to safeguard his life with unwavering devotion. Krat perceives the shift in everyone's countenances. The young man has at least earned a measure of their loyalty. A while later, Krat approaches our protagonist. He announces their imminent departure, and that they await only the signal. Kaix discerns a change in their gaze towards him. Observing their resolve, he understands this is no time for remorse. He felt compelled to instill hope for the future in everyone. He then commended the entire group for their valiant efforts in the recent skirmish against the Sasquatch threat. Their objective was to reach their designated location with utmost haste. However, they would not forsake or leave behind any wounded comrade. The men bellow their affirmation, acknowledging his directive. The scene shifts, revealing events from an hour prior. Layla was advancing when a Sasquatch abruptly charged towards her. With her characteristic agility, she nimbly evaded the onslaught. But she hadn't anticipated their swift detection of her presence. She hurls a dagger, its trajectory aimed at a nearby rope, utilizing it to propel herself to the opposite side. She deftly parries the Sasquatch's attack and ascends, securing a position upon a sturdy branch. With this maneuver, she obstructs the creature's path and then swiftly descends back to the ground. As she pivots, the beast resumes its relentless pursuit. Suddenly, the creature slams face first into a concealed snare. With the beast incapacitated, her final task was to eliminate the threat. Yet, the creature persists, seizing a tree trunk and yanking it from the earth. This was unforeseen. The behemoth lunges for a crushing embrace, aiming for vagina, but she nimbly evades its grasp, sliding aside. With deft movements, she begins to encircle its neck with the rope. Before the beast can comprehend the situation, it finds itself ensnared, struggling for breath. Against all odds, her strategy has succeeded. She hadn't believed it feasible to sever the monster's sinewy tendons with this primate strength. Moreover, the cords were too slender for the creature to grip effectively. Then, she observes that even while constricted, it continues to topple trees. A wave of astonishment washes over her, and she resolves to swiftly conclude this encounter. According to Kaix's instructions, her sole task was to introduce the toxin directly into the creature's circulatory system. The colossal creature lunges in for another devastating blow, but with agility, she evades the attack, slipping deftly behind the beast. She produces a syringe and plunges the needle directly into the monster's neck. She had meticulously followed his every instruction, yet doubt lingered. She remained uncertain of its efficacy. Now, her sole recourse was to implore the heavens for success. The primate, however, exhibits no signs of pacification. It continues its relentless rampage, its fury splintering the surrounding trees. A chilling realization dawns upon her. The toxin is not producing the anticipated effect, or rather, it is functioning, albeit differently, as the ape's eyes roll back ominously. Before it collapses face first onto the earth, astonishment washes over her. It actually worked, despite her reluctance to acknowledge it. That arrogant blonde youth possessed a superior understanding of toxicology, but a profound unease remains. His transformation overnight was too drastic, too sudden. She had observed him closely for over a year. He's undergone a sudden and complete transformation. At least, she desperately hopes it's for the best. After all, she'd abandoned the idea of retribution. But now, vengeance might be within reach. Back on the wagons, Kaix casts a glance at the surviving soldiers. They remain weary and battered. He informs Kraut they'll halt here. Kraut acknowledges with understanding. As the soldiers settle beneath the trees, Kaix approaches, proffering revitalizing elixirs. They hesitate, aware of the potion's steep price. But our hero simply tosses them the vials. He urges them to imbibe without delay. Just then, someone appears behind him and questions his actions. Kaix anticipated this disapproval. Kraut interjects, explaining that even a basic potion commands a hefty sum. These Russell had meticulously crafted specifically for him. After all, a mere 10 vials like these depleted half of their household's financial reserves. Kaix, seething with indignation, demands, if he's suggesting they abandon everyone to their affliction. While these elixirs remain untouched, Kraut, visibly perturbed, stammers that his intentions were misconstrued. Under the watchful gaze of the crowd, our protagonist reassures them, urging them to dismiss their worries. Upon the expedition's conclusion, they would possess ample funds to acquire an unlimited supply of these potions. At that precise instant, both are once again taken aback. The soldiers genuflect, expressing gratitude to the Lord for his munificence. A bewildered Kaix is rendered speechless. Meanwhile, Kraut discerns that these soldiers have irrevocably committed their lives to his cause. Our hero commands him to erase that foolish grin from his face and prepare for departure. Upon boarding the wagon, a system notification materializes on a screen, revealing that the approval rating has surged to 18%. He beams and instructs them to proceed. The wagons continue their trek through the dense woods. After some time, a shout commands them to halt. Crowd inquires about the sudden stop. Kaix announces their arrival at the designated location. Crowd appears perplexed, as he discerns no hidden entrance. Moreover, the area is devoid of guards. He questions the nature of this peculiar place. Kaix asks if Layla has transmitted any communication. Kraut responds in the negative. Consequently, they resolve to establish a temporary encampment. Pending further directives, they will remain stationary. Later, inside a tent, Kaix indicates a specific area on the map, declaring that the Hashiran family vault lies at that precise point. Kraut questions if his assessment is inaccurate. Our protagonist promptly refuses. Krat, visibly agitated, shouts that according to the cartography, reaching the destination would require at least a week's journey. The troops, longing for home after an extended deployment, were already succumbing to fatigue. Informing them of another week's march would likely result in mass desertion. Perhaps even half the men would abandon the mission. Thomas adds his own concerns, stating that lingering in a single location for an extended period invites peril. Discovery by the enemy would be imminent. Kaix lastly interjects, demanding they heed his words. Before further grievances are aired, he clarifies that he merely indicated the strongbox's position on the map, not that they intended to travel there directly. Krat inquires, seeking clarification, whether the expedition's primary aim isn't the acquisition of the vault. Kaix strolls to a secluded corner of the tent and reveals that they will gain access to it from an alternative route. He begins pounding the ground, frantically seeking something until his foot lands on a lever. Abruptly, the earth beneath him ascends, and a stone materializes before him. The man appears utterly bewildered as he begins tinkering with a complex puzzle. Without warning, the stone plunges back into the earth. The moment the fair-haired youth steps forward to pursue the path, the man seizes him, cautioning that it could be a perilous snare. Our protagonist expresses strong doubts about that. Kraut confesses his own perplexity and inquires how Kaix possesses knowledge of this location. Kaix declares that his information originates from a trustworthy informant, given his prior shortcomings. He understands their skepticism. However, he assures them they will soon witness the truth for themselves. Kraut appears slightly flustered. Thomas intervenes, declaring his unwavering faith in their commander, a leader who esteemed even the most vulnerable among his troops, a leader deserving of implicit trust. The other soldiers beside them echo this sentiment, affirming their belief in him. Should they pursue this course and perish regardless, it would be a noble end. Croc becomes visibly moved. Our protagonist implores them to relinquish their blind faith because he remains feeble. He lacks the proficiency to even wield mana effectively. They were utter fools to entrust their lives to someone so inadequate. Kama offers a smile, and let me assure you, the smiles in this narrative harbor a sinister quality. One can't help but sense that these individuals possess ulterior motives. Thomas counters that true strength transcends mere physical prowess. Our hero instructs Croc to cease his weeping and addresses the group. He declares it's time for their departure. With that command, the Legion began their descent down the staircase. Concurrently, Kaix gazed out from the tent's entrance, trusting that Layla's mission proceeded without complications. Returning to everyone's beloved executioner, Layla was meticulously gathering simian blood. Wiping her face, she declared she had acquired a sufficient quantity. Positioned before the cavern's mouth, she announced it was time for some amusement. She commenced striking two wooden fragments together to ignite a blaze. The subsequent scene revealed her nimbly leaping between tree limbs. From a distance, the conflagration she had ignited was discernible. With this inferno, all the Sasquatches in the vicinity would inevitably be lured towards. A predicament arose, however, in the form of an unforeseen presence. Several cloaked figures, bearing disquietingly recognizable emblems, were traversing the region and stumbled upon lifeless forms scattered on the ground. Layla had anticipated the emergence of these vile pests. Her hand grasped the dagger's hilt. She vows to conclude this matter. She will demonstrate the repercussions of betrayal. With the stance of a headsman, one of the fallen men frantically scribbles on parchment. He declares a dire emergency. His Sasquatch's remains have been discovered. No injured individuals were found nearby. The implication is clear. A formidable adversary, capable of vanquishing such a beast, lurks within this very region. Only one lineage in these lands possesses such prowess. The Viscount must be alerted post-haste. Layla observes discreetly from the shadows. She witnesses the sealing of the missives. She recognizes their scouts' distinctive markings. She gauges the wind's direction. She retrieves a vial of blood from her pocket and applies it to the adjacent tree trunk. Yet again, another individual is securing a missive. She observes from her perch amidst the foliage above. The perspective transitions to the Sasquatches, converging upon the bonfire. They collectively enter the cavern. Abruptly, one of them pauses, inhaling deeply. They erupt in a chorus of roars and veer off course. A courier bearing the correspondence is vaulting through the canopy. He's driven by the urgency of his mission. He must relay the intelligence with utmost haste. He halts on a limb to survey the path ahead and is met with a dagger plunged squarely into his chest. His gaze descends to the embedded blade. As he pivots to confront his assailant, he's propelled earthward with a forceful kick. He crumples ignominiously. Layla advances toward the lifeless form, seizes the dispatch, and comprehends its contents. The prince must be alerted to this immediately. Without hesitation, she breaks into a run. In the meantime, the Sasquatches lumber through the dense woods, guided by the pungent aroma of blood. Concurrently, the expedition presses onward through the subterranean passage. Kaix possesses the knowledge that this location was constructed by a sorcerer, one who sought seclusion to pursue arcane experimentation. Therefore, it seems illogical that this individual would rig their own dwelling with a multitude of snares. Kraut counters that such measures would be for personal protection. However, our protagonist rests his palm against the wall and declares, "There's no evidence of excavation. Even the staircase is imbued with magical energies to possess such resilience. The architect would need to be, at the very least, an archmage of the Eighth Order, which signifies if this individual truly intended to lay traps, we would all be deceased already." Kraut is momentarily speechless, continuing along the path. They arrive at a corridor leading into a colossal chamber. With a surge of excitement, Kraut directs Thomas to safeguard their young companion, while the others commence a treasure hunt. Kaix adds that any intermediate level potions discovered should be allocated to the wounded soldiers. He strolls over to a chair and settles down calmly. Just then, Thomas inquires how Viscount Hashirin unearthed such ruins. The boy responds thoughtfully. Perhaps by chance, or maybe someone divulged the information. He admits his uncertainty. Thomas then comments on the peculiar fact that they possessed a mystical crystal orb. Abruptly, Kaix's countenance shifts. He ponders aloud if this is what he suspects. Although the magical barriers had diminished, they weren't something the Viscount could readily breach. He then questions the identity of the Viscount's liege lord. Thomas responds that it's Marcos Antonio. Kaix understands he must brace himself for the direst outcome. Just then, Kraut arrives with the intermediate level potions. Kaix promptly instructs him to distribute them among the troops. Kraut complies. Dubby can't help but contemplate the exorbitant cost of such reckless expenditure. However, Kaix recognizes that in this critical juncture, the well-being of his soldiers takes precedence over hoarding potions. They are then presented with several mystical crystals, supplementary potion ingredients, and other artifacts. Nothing was entirely without value, yet nothing possessed exceptional worth either. Nevertheless, Kaix reasons that if the system designated this location as a treasure trove, a concealed secret must still remain. Abruptly, he detects a presence emanating from a shadowed corner of the chamber. Suddenly, Kraut interjects, placing his hand before Kaix. He inquires, "What's the matter?" Kraut asserts their investigation is concluded, and no threats lurk in the darkness. He admonishes Kaix to cease his solitary actions. Kaix, undeterred, advances, declaring his indifference. He contends that Kraut lacks the capacity for understanding. Kaix glides his hand along the wall, striving to recall the concealed entrance's location. His fingers discover a minuscule, thumb-sized indentation. Abruptly, everything transforms. The boy's coveted prize materializes. A decade of gaming has evidently yielded rewards. Within lies a colossal crystal orb. Lesser crystal spheres encircle it. The chamber resembles a surveillance center, capable of observing their entire expedition. Kraut, however, observes that this location possesses a distinctly peculiar aura. They meticulously examined every ruin. Yet he possesses no recollection of encountering a chamber like this. Alex elucidates that this structure is known as a false ruin. Historically, it was customary to construct dual entrances. One was readily discernible, but yielded no treasures. Consequently, most explorers would abandon their pursuit. Kraut deduces that this deceptive facade must conceal the Hashiran family's clandestine vault. Kaix interjects that, given the interconnected nature of everything, they can access it from their current position. He rests his hand upon the orb, attempting to ascertain the requisite function for activation. After a brief period of contemplation, they detect a proximate sound. As Krat rushes over, he observes a door swinging open. Kaix informs him that this passage leads to the deceptive ruins. However, Krat, gazing intently at the orbs, suggests there's more to uncover. He indicates that within the faux ruins lies a hidden entryway. This portal connects to the silver mine, the source of the Hashiran family's immense wealth, which has been generating substantial profits for the Hashiran clan. Krat declares that now the royal family's obliviousness to this operation is evident. Kaix cautions that the absence of individuals suggests the site is likely utilized only at designated intervals to maintain secrecy and prevent the dissemination of rumors. The laborers are probably eliminated shortly thereafter. Krat is enraged, but Kaix placates him, assuring him everything will be all right. Their objective is simply to deactivate the crystalline sphere. The Hashirans employ a specific key for access. It's analogous to altering security protocols and network access points. After securing the necessary provisions, he intends to bequeath a parting gift to his adversaries. He instructs Kraut to rally the men and commence gathering all the containers. Their departure is imminent. However, Kraut is once again overcome with melancholy at the prospect of abandoning the prince. For pity's sake, retrieve my wife, he implores. Calm yourself, Kaix interjects, asserting his ability to manage the situation independently. Kraut reluctantly acquiesces, vowing a swift return. With Kraut's exit, Kaix exults, finally relishing a moment of solitude. In a serendipitous discovery, our protagonist unearths another concealed pathway. Within, he encounters an object that evokes a sense of familiarity. Although its appearance differs significantly from its in-game counterpart, he recognizes it as the armlet of the Grand Alchemy Priest. Note, the original translation here is nonsensical, attempting to decipher the incoherent translation. This is quite unusual. Its function activates when you're on the verge of death. It generates a protective shield, lasting for 2 hours. But if you sustain another substantial blow while the shield is engaged, it will naturally shatter. The device has a 1-week recharge period, and after 3 deployments, it becomes inert. Nevertheless, it was ideally suited for him. Currently lacking any combat prowess, he fastens it to his wrist. He muses that it's akin to possessing 3 spare lives. Poised to depart, he discerns one final element. Within the item's discovery location, an inscription was present. He attempts decipherment, grasping only fragments, something regarding Hecatoria or a similar term. The dilemma is that the remainder of the inscription is unintelligible to him. He recalls that during gameplay, he encountered the moniker Hecatoria. According to folklore, she is the deity who imparted the knowledge of magic to humanity. However, he's positive this entity wasn't present in the game. Could this be exclusive to this particular realm? As his finger makes contact, a surge of electrical energy courses through him, accompanied by a tremor. Abruptly, it feels as though only his consciousness persists. Disoriented, he questions his location and his inability to see. Gazing downwards, he perceives a colossal eye encircled by luminescent azure forms. He ponders if this could be the dominion of the Celestials that he'd heard tales of, the so-called divinities who oversee the inhabitants of this world. Suddenly, he convulses in agony as a voice reverberates within his mind. It's as if the words are being forcibly implanted directly into his brain. A crimson-haired woman's voice declares that this is both unjust and barbaric. However, one of the power sources retorts that no humans were present. It cautions Hecator that the issue was already resolved by a majority vote. She should not contemplate violating the agreement. The woman objects vehemently, exclaiming that it's brutality, and she refuses to condone it. Another voice interjects that if she yearns so desperately for humanity, her desire shall be fulfilled. Abruptly, she manifests on her knees, ensnared by a colossal eye. Kaix perceives a horrifying, incomprehensible noise. Meanwhile, Hecator is shrieking amidst the chaos. He clamps his hands over his ears, unable to endure the torment any longer. Voices pronounce that Hecator has been demoted to the status of a demigod. Addressing her by her former moniker would become inappropriate. Henceforth, her previous name should be abandoned. She was destined to become a pariah, thrust into agonizing lunacy, tormented by the very creatures she once cherished. They yearned to witness the horror etched upon her visage. Abruptly, in that very instant, Alex materialized back within the chamber. Bewilderment reigns. He's perplexed. I'm disoriented. You're confounded as well. This must be the author's deliberate design. Unexpectedly, the system interface materialized, leaving Kaix astounded. He had unwittingly absorbed a fraction of Hepatoria's primary power. It manifested as an aptitude, seemingly capable of inflicting widespread harm upon all adversaries in proximity. The potency of the damage correlated directly with his level. Evasion was deemed impossible. However, a paradox existed. The greater the number of foes, the less devastating the overall impact. Kaix possessed the knowledge that skills typically spanned a hierarchy of ranks, F to S rank, but exceptions exist concerning so-called unique aptitudes and even rarer authority abilities. These possess an even more distinct potency, wielded solely by X-class individuals, or those known as demigods. In essence, cultivating an authority is the sole path to attaining the X-class. A new system window materializes, declaring he has assimilated an authority fragment. This elevates his soul's echelon. Kaix is now convinced that the entity responsible for his dispatch to this realm was the goddess Hecatoria. He understands that only authority-level powers can inflict harm upon a deity. Perhaps she harbors the hope he will somehow avenge her. The madman erupts in laughter, hand concealing his face, pondering if this truly signifies the endgame. The true aim of this challenge is becoming increasingly clear. He senses manipulation. He resolves to conclude this ordeal, willing or not. Just then, Kraut reappears, inquiring about his progress. Kaix advises him to brace himself. The following scene reveals a perplexed Kraut. Utter pandemonium reigns. The atmosphere is vibrant with activity. The chamber overflowed with riches. Gathering the sheer volume of treasure required additional time. Coin-laden chests alone amounted to over 30,000. Our protagonist is ecstatic, the bounty surpassing all expectations. Kraut supplements this revelation by mentioning numerous crates brimming with silver ingots. Their estimated value, a staggering 100,000 gold coins. The sole dilemma lies in transporting such a massive quantity of plunder. With their limited expedition resources, Alex contemplates the logistical challenge. He never anticipated that an overabundance of treasure would pose a problem. The predicament, possessing more riches than they can carry. However, the sheer amount is inconsequential to him. It shouldn't be an issue. When he eliminated the goblin, he unlocked the inventory function. He's brimming with self-assurance, a smug grin spreading across his face, while Kraut puzzles over his sudden elation. Kaix curtly instructs him to bring the containers closer. He'll manage the remainder. Kraut inquires if everything before them has been accounted for. The man affirms it. Kaix then directs him to ready everyone for the homeward voyage. Kraut consents, although he's clueless about the lad's intentions. However, Kaix recognizes that in this realm, the notions of players and abilities are non-existent. Explaining inventory would be excessively time-consuming. Thus, instead of elucidating, he'll simply demonstrate. At that juncture, Kraut announces that everyone is outside, but questions what they'll do with the cargo. Kaix displays the bracelet, stating he acquired it there, as well as some form of spatial manipulation. It's an exceptionally uncommon relic, possessing ample capacity to accommodate all the containers. Kraut's eyes widen in astonishment. He inquires as to how Kaix acquired such an item. Our protagonist simply advises him to remain silent and safeguard the secret. He explains that truly comprehending the value of such a treasure could prove perilous if discovered by others. He announces his departure, and the group concurs. Still dumbfounded, Kaix expresses gratitude as he departs. Now he needed to concentrate on his mission. Contemplating the inventory, the system interface materializes. He ponders if it will be as effortless as a game. He makes contact with one of the crates, and instantaneously, it manifests within the inventory as silver ingots. It appears as straightforward as he envisioned. He commences organizing his loot. Man, this kid's like a Minecraft pro, stacking everything in neat piles of 99. With the bounty secured, it's time for the return trip. He ascends the staircase, greeted by the men, who announce that all are prepared for the homeward voyage. But Kaix scans the surroundings, uneasy. He inquires about Layla's whereabouts. She's still missing. Kraut responds in the negative. He proposes a troubling theory. Did Layla perhaps betray them and flee? That's why I never place my trust in her, he adds, vindictive. Kaix urges him to face the facts. The Sasquatch's sudden onslaught wasn't mere happenstance. Their attack timed so precisely during the confrontation, after the truth was revealed, leaves everyone stunned. Kraut declares that assaulting the Sasquatch nest single-handedly was a suicidal endeavor. Even though he harbored no fondness for the girl, he couldn't bear the thought of her perishing in that manner. Kaix interjects that he would have advocated for dispatching troops alongside her. However, due to the lack of faith in her, she was compelled to embark on that expedition alone. Clark comprehends that he was not only mistaken, but their survival was directly attributed to her actions. Our protagonist posits that if she has indeed returned, it must be a consequence of some unforeseen circumstance. Thanks to her bravery, they averted innumerable casualties. Now, it's their turn to reciprocate and offer assistance. Everyone snaps to attention. Kraut declares his unwavering obedience to the leader's commands. The remaining knights concur, asserting that if she jeopardized her life for the collective good, they are obligated to repay her valor. Meanwhile, an oblivious Sermon is lost in thought, simply pondering that this entire mission has been fraught with peril. At least now, under the cloak of darkness, Hawu fulfills his obligation. Kaix commands the group to divide into squads. One team will commence a search for her, while the remaining members will conceal themselves within the ruins. He contemplates two potential scenarios. Regarding Layla's predicament, she was either pursued by the Sasquatch chieftain or by operatives from her own faction. Currently, he suspects the Sasquatches are responsible, as no other pursuers have materialized. Moreover, he's confident that she possesses sufficient caution to avoid capture. The immediate challenge is devising a strategy to locate her. Kraut inquires about their subsequent course of action. Kaix verifies that everyone is prepared. The current objective is to proceed directly to the Sasquatch stronghold and initiate retribution for Kraut's demise. In a gesture of dissent, Kaix presents him with some herbs. He instructs him to ignite them. This will yield a specific type of oil, that every warrior should apply a coating of the substance to their armaments. He cautions Kraut against protesting the strategy, and Kraut readily acquiesces. Kaix glances upwards, instructing Layla to remain patient. They conduct surveillance on the Sasquatch stronghold. They are certain that only females and offspring are within. Kaix declares that they will eliminate those inside first, prompting the males to hastily retreat into the cavern. However, the men appear apprehensive, questioning the morality of the plan, since they are already cognizant of the creature's formidable nature. Our protagonist urges them to witness firsthand the potency of the toxin applied to their weaponry. With that declaration, they advance, and the Sasquatches detect a disturbance. The entire horde commences its relentless march towards them. As the skirmish erupts, Kaix perceives the approach of reinforcements. They sprint towards the cavern, and Kaix proclaims it's their moment to strike. They pursue a trail of footprints, and our hero remarks, he's certain Layla wouldn't succumb to those beasts. Thus, it'll pursue the most prominent tracks. Mounted on Thomas's back, they commence their sprint. En route, Thomas inquires if Kaix harbors affections for the woman. He understands, after all, she possesses a striking allure. Kaix instructs him to concentrate on their objective and cease his jests, but Thomas retorts that he never envisioned her volunteering for such a perilous endeavor. Kaix counters that she recognized their dependence on her as well. Currently, the Chikin family provides her sole sanctuary. Pondering the girl's visage, Kaix deduces that on Earth, she'd be a renowned figure. However, Layla remains indifferent to such notions. Perhaps it's due to a lifelong imperative for survival. This game's inaugural large-scale event is titled the Giabaru Invasion, and the clan inhabiting these peaks were directly implicated in the incident. Possibly from its very inception, Selvia might have been orchestrating everything. Within the cavern, Kraut marvels at their triumph. The men rejoice, proclaiming that, as the divine foretold, eliminating the primates with the toxin was effortless. However, they remind one another that respite is not an option. They swiftly resume their hurried flight. Crawd, awestruck, declares that when it comes to venoms, he holds Kaix in the highest esteem. He prays for Layla's well-being. Suddenly, they discern a figure prostrate on the earth. Crimson stains their lips as they advance. Thomas and Kaix perceive something amiss. Our protagonist is aghast to discover Layla recumbent on the ground, encircled by a pair of lupins. Thomas surges forward, cleaving the first canine. Simultaneously, Kaix rushes to her aid. The dilemma is that her laceration is far more severe than anticipated. He swiftly administers an intermediate-level potion. Fortunately, it appears to suffice. The sole obstacle is that her recuperation will be protracted, and she'll encounter numerous more adversaries. Thomas reappears, declaring he repelled the wolves. He assists our companions in raising Layla to a sitting position, as Kaix provides her with additional potion. Her complexion begins to ameliorate. Both experience a surge of relief in that instant. Kraut materializes, and our protagonist exclaims, "Your arrival is incredibly opportune." The narrative leaps forward 1 week. At Chicken Castle, our hero, who bears a striking resemblance to a fair maid, is undergoing rigorous training. For heaven's sake, someone remarks, "This lad is utterly feeble. He's merely level 18. Isn't that acceptable? He's a mere 15 years of age." The median level for a grown man is approximately 20. From a short distance, Russell observes and notes that the boy's endurance is at least ameliorated. An understatement considering Kaix's physique was already quite impressive. Kraut remarks on the stark transformation since their exploration of the ancient ruins. He jests that Kaix might be imbibing some clandestine elixir. The obstinate fellow exudes unwavering self-assurance, resembling a character straight out of Solo Level. He declares that his ascension to greater power has merely commenced. The attendant proposes, commencing blade training forthwith. However, Russell interjects, stating Kaix requires recuperation. Abruptly, Kaix proclaims a pressing matter to attend to. At the mystical tower this very day, Kraut, caught unaware, is met with Kaix's instruction to prepare himself, since he's joining the excursion. With that declaration, he takes his leave. However, Russell notes that Kaix seems to have placed considerable faith in Kraut. Kraut professes ignorance as to the reason, but firmly believes the lad possesses extraordinary aptitude. Moreover, he asserts that Kaix genuinely values his subordinates and the citizenry of the realm. Russell remarks that recently, deciphering the young man's motivations and thought processes has become challenging. Kraut concedes that while gifted, Kaix still requires the guidance of a mentor, but Russell counters that the immediate priority is for Kaix to formally secure his rightful title. He must complete the coming-of-age ritual and ascend to Class 4 without delay, regardless the apprehension that Russell once harbored regarding the territory's destiny has vanished completely. It has dissipated into thin air. Never anticipated finding a suitable candidate so swiftly. The locale abruptly changes to a branch of the mystical tower, nestled within Shakan's domain, amidst a boundless expanse of books. A greeter awaits as our duo emerges. And lo, another perilous predicament arises for everyone, with thoughts lingering on Layla. Where is the maiden who disappeared after the harrowing rescue? A lady extends a warm reception to the comely youth and the strapping gentleman, ushering the man inside. She jovially encourages them to settle in. Her exuberance seems remarkably atypical for a mage. She inquires about their fondness for tea and employs telekinesis to position the cups before them. As her fingers graze the teapot, vapor begins to ascend, leaving Kaix astounded. To encounter a Class 5 mage in such a secluded locale is unexpected. Her moniker is Rose, known in the realm of dreamwalkers. 32 years have graced her existence, though she retains the appearance of a 26-year-old. Presenting the tea, she probes the reason for his astonishment. Kaix responds, he never anticipated encountering someone so remarkable in such a backwater locale. Oddly enough, the onlookers are already speculating if this woman aligns with Kaix's preferences. Is she Kaix's type? Kaix postulates that instantaneous heating capabilities signify a mage of at least the 5th tier. He deems it improbable for a woman in her 20s to attain such prowess. Such a feat requires immense talent. The sly dog knows she's 32, but he's laying the flattery on thick. She's completely flustered. The fool has taken the bait. Kraut is about to interject that she's not in her 20s, but our protagonist gives his arm a squeeze. The ruse succeeds, leaving her beaming. However, she confesses to being over 30. Our hero, a true charmer, inquires about her secrets to eternal youth. She claims her secret is simple: washing her face with water. Kraut remains silently seated, observing the scene. Observing their exchange, a period of time elapses. Finally, Rosen inquires about the purpose of their visit to her tower. They were finally arriving at the crux of the matter. Kaix declares his intention to purchase explosion scrolls. Visibly impressed, she remarks on his unusual request. She informs him that 30 such scrolls typically command a price of 600 gold pieces. However, due to his undeniable charm, she offers a discounted price of 500. Our protagonist is delighted to discover that his appealing features can secure him a reduction. He cautiously questions whether this will cause repercussions for her. Rosen allays his concerns, affirming her authority to modify prices as she sees fit. Kaix then reveals an additional proposition, albeit one that is somewhat delicate to articulate. He desires to procure funds from the reserve allocation. This declaration does not elicit a positive response. She probes him about the specific sum he wishes to acquire. When he utters the figure of 60,000, the woman expels her tea in astonishment. Naturally, she states there's absolutely no possibility of lending such a substantial amount. However, our protagonist reveals he intends to leave a surety, gold coins and silver ingots as security, and until repayment is made, she's welcome to levy interest. At the mere mention of interest, Rosen, who exudes a distinct aura of avarice, becomes visibly enraptured. Kaix clarifies that it will be a transient loan, but he desperately requires the funds. The reason being, it would be catastrophic if Gerard discovered he's utilizing the very currency Kaix pilfered from him. Kaix understands this establishment is the sole source for acquiring 60,000 gold pieces. Rosen inclines her head, expresses remorse, and declares that regrettably, the sum is simply excessive. Kaix hadn't anticipated this refusal. It appears his reputation was insufficient, or perhaps his approach was overly impetuous. She continues, asserting that the overseer would undoubtedly refuse the request. However, she promptly proposes an alternative solution, discreetly shielding her mouth with her hand. She reveals that the personnel at Central Command rarely scrutinize her jurisdiction. Perhaps, she muses, it might be feasible, but the arrangement would necessitate absolute secrecy, confined solely to the 3 individuals present. Provided he reimburses the loan within 6 months, no complications would arise. But the moment the half-year period elapsed, she would liquidate all the gold and silver to recoup the funds. Our young man is ecstatic. That was precisely his intention all along. Mages are inherently avaricious, as their investigations demand substantial resources, and she was undoubtedly speculating that he would lack the means to repay the debt. Thus, she could surreptitiously acquire all the accrued interest. He profoundly bows, expressing his sincere gratitude, expressing profound relief should she accomplish this task. Concurrently, he contemplates that he has now settled his obligation to Gerard. Speaking of the deceived individual, he sits before a subordinate and vehemently demands the map, slamming it upon the table, consumed by fury because a patrol unit near the vault has vanished without a trace. He ponders his own vulnerability. Suddenly, a chilling realization dawns upon him. Unimpeded access to the vault would require less than a single day. He teeters on the precipice of explosive rage. Instantly, he commands all to prepare for a swift expedition to the Golda territories. However, the unimpeded route proved treacherous. Layla's former squad collides head-on with a golem, with Gerard menacingly close behind. They are left with no alternative but to engage. The golem unleashes a devastating blow with its colossal hand. Comprehending their inability to evade, the imbeciles are launched skyward. The adjacent, feebler individuals already grasp the inevitable, that any forward movement equates to demise. Proximity proved unnecessary, as they're instantly squashed. Another man, his hair blanching with terror, vociferates a warning, yet he too is pulverized. These individuals are being utterly decimated. 2 more simpletons succumb to panic as another golem concludes their existence. Gerard remains motionless, while the men's instructor contemplates the golem's unexpected manifestation. Such entities don't arise spontaneously, implying the proximity of at least a fifth-tier mage. He pivots to Gerard, proposing a withdrawal, but Gerard bellows in response, inquiring the rationale behind such a suggestion. Regardless of circumstances, they must persevere. The route had to be cleared within a 24-hour time frame, due to their mandatory tributes to the Marquis. Even if everyone perished in that location, their advance was non-negotiable. Back at the stronghold, Rosen nonchalantly inquires if they received a small token of appreciation. She muses if it's something amorous, like a paramour or a clandestine liaison. Our protagonist refutes this, to which she responds that, in that scenario, she desires a present from him. Suddenly, Layla barges through the entrance, demanding to know if there's truly an elderly crone. Attempting to ensnare her lord, Kaix strides in and proclaims that all the lovish has been secured within the fortress. Concurrently, Layla fixes Rosen with a piercing glare. Armoy commends her for the commendable effort and bestows upon her an item. He then requests both of them to withdraw outside. As they depart, Layla inquires about the prince's conversation with the mage. Crotch simply whistles, feigning ignorance. Meanwhile, Rosen, overcome with joy, blushes intensely. She exclaims, "It's magnificent!" Armoy presented her with a necklace adorned with golden pearls. Astonished, she questions the sincerity of such a lavish gift. He explains it's a gesture of appreciation for the financial resources she secured for them. This was naturally the very artifact the system had revealed to him. He urges her to maintain absolute secrecy regarding the matter. Although they attempted to proceed through official channels, the necessary documentation would have been undeniably rejected. However, Kaix is aware of her pursuit of the interest accrued from the loan intended for the construction of the magic tower. Rosen assures him, vowing to remember his instructions. She emphasizes his unwavering reliance upon her. Intrigued, she inquires about his need for such a large quantity of explosive scrolls. She wonders if he's anticipating an impending conflict. Kaix is astonished by her astute deduction. Seriously, though, extracting information like this, it's a standard inquiry. You acquired 30 scrolls capable of obliterating everything. He rises and declares that he harbors no such intentions. Those scrolls are solely designated for excavation purposes. She finds it peculiar that he utilized something so costly, merely to burrow holes. She inquires if he stumbled upon the legendary MC goldmine. Kaix is weary of the sheer volume of information this woman is attempting to glean from him. He bids her farewell with a wave, stating they'll resume their dialogue at a later juncture. She appears astonished, but offers a smile, expressing her anticipation for their next encounter. Outside, he finally possesses 60,000 gold within his inventory. With this sum, the territory's immense debts could be completely settled. He eagerly awaits Gerard's response upon discovering the pilferage of his valuables. While acknowledging his insignificance, he intends to vend the odes. Clearly, he won't allow the mastermind behind his attempted murder to escape unscathed. They will face retribution for their actions. Even if they remain blissfully unaware, his vengeance has already commenced. The quest for retribution is far from over. Back at the golem, the men have ensnared it with chains, attempting to topple the behemoth. They've tethered it to the earth, exerting force from every direction, until they finally unveil its vulnerable core. One of the men lunges, plunging a knife into it, bellowing a death knell. He strikes the very heart of its chest. The core erupts in a blinding flash, unleashing a devastating explosion. As debris is catapulted in all directions, the squad is decimated. Lifeless bodies litter the ground. Swords lie scattered amidst the fallen. A survivor declares their victory over the golem, but at a staggering cost, 60% of their comrades. Gerard, however, silences his complaints. "Just open the damn gates already," he commands. They arrive at the sanctuary's entrance. A man presents the crystalline sphere. Upon placing it on the portal, a message flashes, "User invalid." Unauthorized entry is detected. Defensive protocols initiate. An alarm blares. A voice commands them to retreat. Within 180 seconds, the man stresses, attempting to utilize the orb once more. Predictably, the error persists. Frustrated, Gerard assaults the door with a kick. Baffled by the malfunction, he's clueless as to the cause. Nearby, a subordinate cautions a hasty retreat. They're ignorant of the potential consequences of these security protocols, are affiliated with that They break into a run, the portal remaining steadfast. The interception protocol initiates its first phase. The security countermeasure involves summoning a multitude of entities, programmed to assail any intruder within a predetermined perimeter, back within the confines of the carriage. Our protagonist inquires as to Layla's source of information. She retorts that she overheard it amidst his exchange with the sorceress. Detecting a hint of vexation in her tone, our hero assures her that such actions were far from his intentions. However, his interaction was purely professional. He had a query for her. He sought to understand the repercussions of hypothetically betraying Selvio. A look of bewilderment crosses her face as she questions why he would even contemplate disloyalty towards the imitation. Our protagonist clarifies that his inquiry stems from a desire to discern Selvio's true character, specifically whether he possesses the temperament to overlook the transgressions of his subordinates. She elucidates that such leniency is not. He possesses an unwavering commitment to perfection, a man who would find even the slightest misstep utterly unacceptable. Our protagonist then inquires about Gerard's fate should the Viscount uncover the truth. Layla admits to being completely unaware. However, she adds that Gerard wouldn't passively accept his demise. He's not one to surrender without a fight. He'd undoubtedly strive for survival, regardless of the cost. It's undeniably clear that he wouldn't hesitate to betray the Viscount if necessary. Our young hero contemplates this apparent truth. The reality is starkly evident. Gerard wouldn't permit himself to be eliminated so effortlessly. Meanwhile, Layla observes him intently, sensing that he's once again concocting a scheme. Gazing into his uniquely hued eyes, she grapples with an unfamiliar emotion. Lost in contemplation, our protagonist feels as though a crucial piece of the puzzle eludes him. The scene shifts back to the realm of Golda. The soldiers had finally eradicated the monstrous horde. However, their Viscount's legion had also suffered devastating losses. They were nearly annihilated. Gerard commanded them to summon reinforcements and breach the sealed entrance. Conventional entry was impossible. Their only recourse was detonation scrolls. The entire doorway was obliterated in a fiery blast. The passage lay open, but a sinister premonition gripped the man. Inside, the anticipated treasures were nowhere to be found. Desperate, he barked orders to locate the silver quickly. A frantic search ensued. Their efforts were futile, of course. Then, one soldier stumbled upon a discarded scroll. Curiosity piqued, he unfurled it. A catastrophic detonation. Every soul was instantly dispatched to the great beyond. When Gerard regained consciousness, he was utterly bewildered. The majority of the men who embarked on the treasure hunt now lie entombed beneath the debris. At that juncture, Gerard instantly comprehends the unfolding tragedy. Viscount Selvio will order their execution. It's imperative to initiate the contingency protocol. He approaches one of his men, expressing his enduring gratitude for his loyal service. He conveys his profound appreciation for the man's unwavering dedication. Suddenly, without warning, another individual emerges from the shadows and swiftly eliminates him. Gerard consoles the assassin, absolving him of any blame. He assures him that his actions were entirely justified. The secret, he explains, could not be allowed to escape that location. Another life is extinguished. The fallen man's companion remarks that an individual named Cape will undoubtedly raise questions about this incident. They will likely detect irregularities in the area and soon unravel the truth. Gerard dismisses this concern as irrelevant. Their only recourse now is to adhere to the emergency plan. The setting abruptly changes to Viscount Selvio's opulent estate. Gerard is present, but the elder statesman remains silent. He stands motionless until finally he declares he was immediately informed of the incident. Gerard prostrates himself, hitting his head against the floor, and desperately implores forgiveness. Selvio asserts that apologies are meaningless to him. Tangible outcomes are the sole measure of worth. He demands to know the whereabouts of the silver, supposedly secured, for the benefit of the collective good. Where has it vanished? Gerard speculates that grave robbers are the likely culprits. He suggests that somehow they must have excavated a tunnel within a single day. Selvio counters that this is illogical. The security apparatus would have been triggered instantly. Moreover, excavating to such a depth would be a protracted endeavor. Gerard fabricates a lie, claiming that the majority of the silver coinage remains untouched. Impossible. A mere band of grave robbers couldn't have pilfered everything in such a brief period. Moreover, we're already surveilling every merchant in the province. will track with a precious metal surface. Once they do, we'll spring an ambush. Silver coinage isn't easily transported over long distances. Inevitably, whoever purloined it will return to peddle it. Salvio acknowledges his understanding and cautions that it's crucial to apprehend these individuals immediately upon their reappearance. Gerard reassures him there's no cause for alarm. It will be handled. Silvio approche à cabinet de Clarine that they must exert unrelenting pressure until these brigands surrender every last piece of silver. However, something significant transpired. Naturally, Gerard had faced repercussions. The hapless man implores for mercy, but the whip crashes down upon his back. Salvio condemns him as a wretched scoundrel and demands to know if he's truly mocking him. Gerard remains impassive, contemplating how he must endure this torment. Salvio relentlessly continues the flogging, bellowing that the most egregious offense is the loss of half the Shadow Force contingent. Years of meticulous preparation, rendered futile because of him. After inflicting considerable punishment upon Gerard's back, Salvio momentarily ceases. He cautions that Gerard's grievances are insignificant, but jeopardizing the paramount objective is an entirely different matter. He proclaims that henceforth, Gerard is stripped of all authority within the Shadow Forces and may only act with his explicit consent. Gerard, naturally, simply affirms his understanding. The man then declares their urgent need for tribute funds. He commands Gerard to notify the Chican territory that they will commence the seizure of their possessions. Even meager assets would suffice in contributing to the tributes. Should procuring anything from Chican prove impossible, Gerard himself must liquidate his belongings to cover the debts. Gerard simply acknowledges his understanding. He assures the man there's no need for concern. Inwardly, however, he contemplates the utter impossibility of losing everything. He toiled relentlessly to reinstate Salviosis and reminds himself that absolution hasn't been granted. He must locate the silver. Failure, he knows, will have dire consequences. Perspiring heavily, Gerard reiterates his comprehension and offers a profound bow before exiting. Gerard's companion inquired about his well-being, offering a restorative elixir. He urged Gerard to recuperate swiftly. After consuming the potion, Gerard was tossed a concealing cloak by the man. He declared their imminent return to headquarters was necessary. However, Gerard pressed for Jacoby's whereabouts. The man explained that Jacoby had overindulged in drink and remained incapacitated since the altercation. But lately, a desert youth bearing a resemblance to Prince Kaix had joined their ranks. Gerard scoffed, expressing his disdain for desert dwellers due to their sun-scorched complexions. Nonetheless, he inquired about the progress of the remaining arrangements. His companion responded that all would be finalized within 3 days' time. The primary concern was the feasibility of a smooth escape. The man allayed his fears, assuring him there was no need for anxiety. Half of their squadron was either deceased or wounded, and the survivors were merely insignificant ruffians. This presented an ideal occasion. Perhaps this string of incidents was a fortunate turn of events. After all, greater financial resources meant a more promising fresh start. A larger nest egg would facilitate their escape. However, Gerard remained skeptical. He suspected the Chican heir had already effortlessly secured victory in the inheritance struggle. Therefore, it likely wouldn't be straightforward. Several days elapsed. Krot entered the chamber, summoning the duo. He declared that Gerard and Mythis had arrived for a visit. The reason was likely the outstanding debts. Russell affirmed that events were unfolding precisely as the prince had foreseen. He instructed Krot to escort the prince to the meeting with the visitors. Russell intended to remain uninvolved in the matter, confident in the boy's leadership capabilities. Krot acknowledged his understanding of the Dominion's future. In the meantime, Gerard, the perpetually unhinged individual, appeared agitated, remarking on the lad's daily physique enhancements. But the young man retorts that he doesn't acknowledge insignificant individuals. He adds that Gerard's haughty demeanor was already straining his forbearance. Therefore, it was prudent to proceed directly to the matter at hand. Gerard declares that if Kaix is so impatient, he'll reciprocate with bluntness. Extending his arms, he proclaims the commencement of the official seizure. He has ascertained that the Chican domain is incapable of remitting the 60,000 gold pieces. Consequently, they will seize all assets therein as security for the outstanding sum. Armoy inquires about Gerard's course of action should he encounter resistance. With a gesture towards his nose, Gerard responds that he will summon a high-ranking authority to guarantee Kaix's apprehension. And naturally, a mandatory territorial audit would ensue. The throng hurls insults at Gerard. However, he retorts that this isn't the occasion for aggression. It's simply that he needs to be slightly more firm in reclaiming his assets, as much as he, too, believes this represents the direst outcome. Our protagonist suggests that if Gerard truly deems it that calamitous, he should postpone the remittance further. Gerard counters that if Kaix exhibited a touch more earnestness, perhaps that could transpire presently. Krot discerns that Gerard is abruptly soliciting a bribe, but Kaix senses that settling the obligation now would merely leave him disadvantaged. Nevertheless, to preclude exacerbating matters for the time being, he resolves to adhere to the customary protocol. He proclaims that he has successfully amassed the majority of the funds. Therefore, there's no necessity for him to be sincere whatsoever. Gerard abruptly rises and inquires as to how he amassed 60,000. Our protagonist questions his apparent astonishment and ire. Was this a favorable outcome? He presents the official documents stating that all figures are authentic. Gerard recognizes the legitimacy of the banknotes as government-issued currency, but how on earth did this youngster procure 60,000 in such a brief period? A scheme then dawns upon Gerard. Abscond with the funds. It would be significantly more advantageous than escaping with gold or silver. Perhaps this was the ideal opportunity to relocate to another nation. Kaix produces a silver ingot, placing it on the table, and invites Gerard to examine it. He clarifies that he possesses 32 of these bars, distributed among 420 containers. Just then, Gerard identifies them as the very silver he had concealed from the markdown. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The Viscount had assumed that Gerard was merely hoarding a few silver coins and some copper. However, Gerard had been covertly exploiting the clandestine mines to accumulate a vast fortune and squirrel it away. Now that Kaix was aware of this deception, it became significantly more difficult for Gerard to defy him. Any insubordination could be reported directly to the Viscount. Selvio had unearthed this treachery. If discovered, Gerard would undoubtedly face execution. Kaix then informed Gerard that their charade was over. There was no longer any need for pretense. He inquired about Gerard's perceived destiny. Given Kaix's purported benevolence, he offered Gerard two alternatives: confess to pilfering for Selvio and accept the consequences, or betray the Viscount and abscond. Gerard was overwhelmed by despair. Gerard wallowed in frustration. Recognizing Gerard's desperate predicament, the young man, seeking to offer a glimmer of hope and aid the besieged Gerard, resolves to intervene. Kaix pledges his assistance to Gerard, promising his survival should he choose to escape. This presents a rare window of opportunity, and Kaix eagerly awaits Gerard's response. Crowd appears perplexed by the prince's proposition. Gerard counters that simply facilitating his escape from the territory is insufficient. The young prince assures Gerard of his unwavering support, guaranteeing his complete protection. Gerard inquires if the prince intends to make him a servant. Kaix retorts that Gerard has already incurred the wrath of the most formidable individual in the realm. Therefore, such an arrangement would be disadvantageous. Consequently, such a proposition would be utterly unfavorable. Gerard then postulates that if he aligned himself with someone even more influential, the prince would undoubtedly be the one yielding. Kaix acknowledges that Gerard has finally grasped the situation and presents a document before him. He explains that upon Gerard's signature, he will divulge the scheme. The document asserts that the Chican region has already settled all outstanding financial obligations to Murtaux's corporations. The unhinged individual erupts in laughter, exclaiming that Kaix is truly formidable. It appears the youth has been deceiving the entire globe all along. Gerard concedes that he will sign, lacking any alternative. Ultimately, he prefers not to antagonize the fair-haired lad. Our young protagonist expresses his gratitude. Meanwhile, Gerard internally contemplates that eventually he will secure a like on this recording, assisting Mamoru in generating more captivating material for his audience. Engage the inconspicuous notification bell